welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of the hosts, Bob Rose, and welcome to the 100th episode. And right now, Jamie's going to introduce himself.
I am Jamie Nash. I am a screenwriter. I wrote the book, Save the Cat Writes for TV, and the Save the Cat Beat Sheet workbook. You can buy both of those on Amazon. That's me. My Twitter handle, we do Twitter handles now. It's only 100 episodes in, I should know, is at Jamie_Nash.
Okay, and now Jimmy, introduce yourself.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter profile pic is me at Jaws on the Water, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And my Twitter handle is at Jimmy R. George.
And I guess I didn't say my Twitter handle, which is at Thundergrunt Bob. But you know, Twitter it's been on shaky ground. That's why we're all like, should we say our Twitter handle?
Yeah, we don't know.
That's why we don't know. But anyway,
it's
100 episodes.
Like my last stand is Twitter, I think.
It's Twitter, yeah.
I'm done. I'm just done.
Jamie's not going to Blue Sky. He refuses.
No.
Mastodon,
Blue Sky, LO. Anyway, 100 episodes. Congratulations to all of us for getting there. Because you know what? Podcasts that go past 5 episodes, that's a big deal. People just quit. That's like it's a thing. So congratulations, guys.
Thanks, Bob. Congratulations to you too.
Thanks. Before we got a pretty hefty. This is Jaws we're talking about. But before we get into all of our normal technical stuff, we're going to go around and say our relationship to the movie, what it means to us, the thing we always do. This episode is going to be, no pun intended, a monster, but that's okay. That's what it's 100. We can do whatever the hell we want. We've earned it. So, which one of you guys? I'm going to ask which one of you guys wants to go first with your personal relationship with Jaws.
I want to hear Jamie first.
Okay, that's it. Let's let the man himself, Jamie.
Yes.
Jamie.
There you go. There you go. So this is one of here's the way I describe this movie that makes it unique. It is, if I have a top 5 movies, 4 out of 5 of them I saw in the theater first, and this one I didn't. So this one falls on that list somewhere, but I didn't see it in the theater first. I saw it. I can't even remember where I saw it first. Like it took me a while. I might have seen Jaws 2 first
on Betamax.
Yeah, because I was let's see, how old was I? I was 3 years old when this movie came out. So they weren't taking me to see Jaws necessarily. Is that right? Yeah, that's the math. So yeah, I was a little kid, so I didn't see it. I saw it somewhere in the 80s after I saw Raiders, after I saw Close Encounters, after I saw Poltergeist, after I saw all these movies. But it did immediately. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And when I was a kid, it was all around me. It was everywhere. Like I remember the summer of Jaws, even though I was only 3 or 4. And the summer of Jaws lasted, keep in mind, for the next 3 or 4 years, because that's the way movies were back then. So everybody had Jaws t-shirts. They had people were reading the book. There were lots of copies of the paperback book all over the place that were kind of folded up and stuff. And you guys are probably the same, but one of the biggest sort of influences and stuff to me as a kid was going to Ocean City, Maryland as a kid. And I'm not sure how you two. So
no, that was
to me
like clockwork.
Jaws and Ocean City, Maryland kind of go, hand in hand. I was on the beach all day. I was
the shark at the end of the pier, the stuffed shark. That's at the end of the pier. When you walk all the way to the end of the boardwalk.
I think
as a kid, I was like, "Is that Jaws?"
I think it was at the Ripley's. Believe it or not, it was coming through the wall. Is that the one you're talking about? Or I'm not sure.
No. There's like an actual shark at the end of the pier near Trimpers.
That they caught on these waters.
I got you.
Yeah, on those
at the end of the pier.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the end of the boardwalk.
It's probably still there. I haven't been in a bit, but
it is.
And I had a grandfather who owned a place, or he rented a place all summer long, and I was there. 50% of my summer was, especially when I was really young, was in Ocean City on the beach, in the water, thinking about sharks, thinking about shark attacks, all this kind of stuff. So it's a huge movie in that way. But I didn't see I was a huge Jaws 2 fan, actually. I was a big fan of that movie because to me, as a little kid, when I saw that movie, and I can't remember how old I think I did see that one in the theater. Um, that was like one of the first really scary movies I saw like that. And to me, I kind of think Jaws 2 is a little underrated. I think it kind of it gives you what you want and that's it. It's like one dimensional. It's like, let's put some kids on rafts and stick them in the water and have Jaws attack. It's kind of
I feel the same
like
about
the
the
movie they
Lost
make
World.
now. Yeah,
That's how I feel about the Lost World
fan too.
There you go.
So
hell yeah.
But I think Jaws 2 is almost like what they do now with it. You know what I mean? It's like the movies we see now with that come out, like The Reef or something like that come out with the sharks. So anyway, that's kind of my history. Like after I saw it, I loved it. I was already a Spielberg fan at that point, and it's one of the few movies. It's probably my most rewatched now. Like I've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark more. I've seen E.T. more, but it's the one movie I still watch like once a year, and I still enjoy it. And I probably because it is, I don't know, adult men kind of, you know what I mean? It's like not like E.T. was the movie I liked when I was a kid. Raiders is this fun kind of kid adventure in some ways, like that kids love. This one does feel, even though it's Jaws, it does still feel like an adult movie in some
like
ways.
You can relate
feels,
to it more.
I maybe I can relate to it more now than I could then.
Do you watch it for 4th of July? Like that's usually when I think people revisit. That's kind of that. I view this as if Christmas movies are Christmas movie, this is the 4th of July movie for me.
Right.
Or Independence Day, like those two movies. But
I don't think I watch any movie for 4th of July, religiously. But
Transformers
I think
4.
Yeah. No, I don't do it. But yeah. Born on the 4th of July is the one I want. No,
that's a really depressing watch to celebrate. But yeah, it's good.
So anyway, that's my Joel story.
All right, mine. Now
Jimmy,
on to me. This is going to be like a 3-parter that I'll try to get done in 5 minutes. So the first reason that this movie is special to me is because I started screenwriting in 1999. So I've been doing this for 24 years. And the very first movie that I attempted to deconstruct is this one. So like what we do on this show, which is like attempt to deconstruct a movie and look for what you can learn from it. This is what started it all. Like and because we're also going to talk about like the nature of it creating the summer blockbuster, I feel like in many ways, if this movie didn't exist, this show wouldn't exist.
It's in our title.
And so it's extra special in that way. So that's the first thing. Now I'm sure I definitely don't have those notes that I made 24 years ago, even though I do have a lot of those first series of deconstructions like in a folder somewhere, and like they're ridiculous. But I'm sure I didn't do a good job. But it was like what sort of like created the spark of like, oh, a movie is just like an engine, and you can take apart the gears and the carburetor and this and that, and you can figure out how it works and why it works, and learn from it, learn to make your own engine, And so that was the first thing for me. So that why this is special. The second is I've had 2 really memorable theater going experiences. The first one is I was helping my brother move across the country from the East Coast to Texas in the summer of 2017, and it was the year that Alamo Drafthouse was doing Jaws on the Water, and I was fucking jealous of everybody in Texas being able to, and for anyone who doesn't know, the Alamo Drafthouse, they did a special series, and now it's not just in Texas. I think they do it every summer, and they do it in multiple cities. But there's a giant inflatable movie screen in a lake, like on the shore of a lake. And then there's like 250 people in Jaws themed rafts that have like blood splatter all over them. They're the color scheme of Alex Kittner's raft and swim shorts. They have Jaws themed rafts that you sit on, and then it doesn't start until nightfall. And there are divers who swim underneath, snorkelers who swim underneath the people during the movie, and they pull at your feet.
You can make a horror movie that happens during that, like.
And when they pull
terrible.
at your feet, I shit you not, when they pull at your feet, they have like red lights on them that light up so the water turns red around you. So you're watching Jaws in the water at night with like 250 other huge fans, obviously, and you're getting tugged at in the darkness by underwater mystery people, and it's just so I was helping my brother move to Texas, and I just on a whim looked up, like, when is Jaws in the water happening? And the day we got there, the day we got to Austin, it was playing, and we went, and I went with my brother. We saw it. It was totally like spontaneous, and it was like my favorite movie going experience of all time. And then the second one is the Senator Theater, which for anyone listening who doesn't know, in Baltimore, like one of the old OG great screens, and this was back, so they have a lot of revival screenings.
Me and Jamie were literally talking about the Senator before we started.
Oh shit. So they also, side note, the Senator Theater is where I met Jamie. A screening of Two Front Teeth, Jamie.
Oh, okay, yeah. I remember the Two Front Teeth screening there. Yeah.
He doesn't remember meeting me either. That's okay.
I don't remember meeting you there.
I don't remember meeting Jamie either, honestly. It just is Jamie. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the Senator has these revival screenings where they show classic movies, and this was before they split it into smaller screens. This was the 900-seat theater, packed on a summer afternoon, packed, so you got that full feel. And what was so cool was the theater was filled with kids, and not like kids like modern kids, right? So kids who grew up with cell phones, kids who clearly had never seen Jaws before. And their response was it was magic, right? Like, I sat in the back of the theater, and it was just like filled with families, and you could see all these parents excited to share this experience with their kids, and the kids were responding so purely to the horror. And there's so much kid stakes in the movie, right? Like, there's so many kids who are at risk. Kids die. Like, it holds nothing back. It pulls no punches with the kids. So it was just a really great theater going experience with like a packed 900-seat theater, seeing this on like the biggest screen in my state, and I'll never forget it. So those three things make this movie extra special for me.
Very cool. I didn't realize that your profile pic was that. That's pretty amazing. For as much as we promote Twitter on here, it's been there the whole time.
I'm standing in front of the Amity because they had I didn't even tell you like all the details of the screen, but they had a life-size Amity billboard with the graffiti on it that you could then take selfies with. So I have a selfie in front of a life-size Amity billboard with the graffiti painted on it with the shark. It's great.
That's pretty cool. I was going to say, too, like, the Senator usually does around 4th of July. They do a Jaws screening. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're doing that anymore, but before COVID, that was like a yearly thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I would go every year.
That's
and
awesome.
It was always packed.
Yeah.
Which was great. It was always packed.
Completely full.
Completely full. Like, it's just really cool to see a theater that full.
Which these days is not
for a revival.
Yeah.
For a revival screening?
Yeah. For a 50-year-old movie, yes.
Without a celebrity there to do a Q&A or something, it's rare
magic.
to see that.
It's
right.
magic.
Yeah. So okay, for mine, look, I love Jaws. You don't need to hear me talk about it. I've decided that. I could say all the things you've already heard. It's 100 episodes, so I'm deviating a little bit. You guys know I love Jaws. I watch Jaws at least once or twice a year. It's like a comfort movie for me. I put it on the background. Whatever. You know that. I wanted to talk about this because I think to some degree it's going to go into some of the things we talk about on this show in our outline, but it's annoyed me for 18 years. For 18 years. And I just want to bring this up. It's the Discovery Channel Mythbusters Jaws special. I don't know if you guys are Mythbusters fans
I'm
or
familiar
anything
with the show. Yeah,
they did a special that was totally centered on Jaws, and it angered me ever since because basically what they did was they treated Jaws as though he were a shark. They treated Jaws as though he were a shark, and that the movie basically wasn't a movie, right? That's what I love Mythbusters, but they had some, problems with the way they approached a lot of their myths.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, for the Jaws special, they tested things like, catching a shark with piano wires, submersion of barrels, pulling and ramming a boat. They even tested the scuba tank exploding, right? Which it can't. If you didn't know that, they took away the magic and proved that you can't blow up a compressed air scuba tank. That's what that's for later. We can talk about that. But I was going to say,
YouTube commented the movie basically.
But here's my problem with what they did, and I think here's a discussion for us in this whole thing is they basically did everything by the largest known great white shark on record. And I remember 18 years ago watching the special saying, okay, number one, Jaws is bigger than the biggest great white shark. Literally, it said in the movie that he's like over 30
25 feet. Yeah.
Or he's bigger than the normal shark. But also I was thinking the whole time, like, this shark, Jaws, this is controversial maybe, isn't just a shark, he's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's a monster movie. It is not it's not just about a shark. He is an aberration of everything. Sharks are not that aggressive. Sharks don't hold grudges. Sharks don't do what Jaws does. He is an aberration. He is a monster. And this was 18 years ago, like we're going to talk about Jamie from like a decade ago today too. But like me from 18 years ago was losing my mind at the television. Like, you can't treat Jaws like a shark.
I know.
He is a documentary. Monster. It's not a documentary. He is a monster. He is a monster, and monsters can do incredible things. Jason Voorhees was once a human, and he still, even as a human, could do things that were unexplainably inhuman, right?
And no one is bothered by it. Yes.
No one's bothered by it. So you can't. So I just wanted to use my small amount of time here to say that when it comes to movies like this, you cannot treat the monster like it's a thing just because it looks like a shark. And he is a shark, but it's not. He's a monster. He's something else that we've never seen before. You know what I mean? It's kind of like how the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are kind of monsters too. They're not actual dinosaurs.
They're monsters.
They have otherworldly qualities that nature. They broke the mold of nature. Bruce broke the mold of nature. You can't test these damn things like a normal shark. And I just wanted to say that because I have this platform and I wanted to yell at Mythbusters 18 years later that, you did it wrong.
You finally got to say it.
I finally got to say it, and it doesn't count because he's this monster and there's different rules. There's dramatic rules. You're talking about a movie. He can bust a hole in a ship. And the tank would explode because it's magic.
Because it's a movie, man.
It's magic, man. That's it. I gotta calm down because I talk too much. But I'm very passionate about how much I hated that special. And that, I feel like that shows how much I love Jaws even 18 years ago. Because I was like, you're ruining it. You're doing it wrong. How dare you? He's a monster. So anyway, that's my time.
Bob lost his voice.
I know I lost my voice saying that, but yeah. So Mythbusters, how dare you? Sure, okay, the tank wouldn't explode. God, I almost wish if I was in charge of that episode, I've been like, let's edit this out. I don't want to ruin this part of the movie for a generation of people. Don't let them know. Don't ruin this for everyone.
So they basically turned it into one of those everything wrong with Jaws YouTube videos, basically.
Yeah, but to defend them, Mythbusters is never like edgelords. They're all very just like it doesn't ruin the movie for them. They don't treat the movie as it's dumb or anything like that.
It's more a theme to do experiments.
It's more of that, but it annoyed me regardless.
To the point that you had to rant for 5 minutes. I love it.
18 years later, I waited 5 years of this show to finally say it. But that is like a thing, right? We're talking about Monster in the House eventually. He's a monster.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
They did a Mythbusters on Sharknado and said totally plausible.
I lost my mind. I was like, what? How dare you? I will say this: they did do a Temple of Doom episode, and they proved a few things that people have doubted for years
about the arc.
And I was like, that was like the opposite. I was like, see, it does work.
They did an arc episode too, where they were showing the science behind the arc and everything. It was cool.
Oh, really? That's cool.
It's great.
Yeah, I mean, they did a lot of. They did them. I love the movie episodes, but they also were like, don't tell me it's not real. I don't want to know that. I was like bitter about finding out that movies aren't real. It was 18 years ago. So we are flipping the script on this episode a little bit. So if it's wonky, everybody just go with us. We'll get to what you're expecting eventually. So to start out, I'm going to ask Jamie, what was the box office of the first ever blockbuster?
Yeah, the worldwide box office for Jaws. And by the way, this is probably, because keep in mind, these movies kept getting re-released and re-released, much like Star Wars, much like E.T. So they kept building their box office over time. But it's $476 million at the time.
That's with inflation, or?
That I don't think that's with inflation. I think that's how
it
much
feels like
made.
That would be higher with inflation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So to give you an example, my favorite thing, listing movies,
I'm so excited. This is show premise delivery.
Is this our
if Jamie wasn't
movie?
a writer, he'd be doing this, listing stuff.
Yeah, this is our oldest movie, guys. This is the oldest movie we've ever done.
Oh, really?
So I especially think it's important to do the list for this one, because then you can see how much more money it made than other movies at the time. So Jaws was number one. Domestically, it made $272 million just domestically. The next movie, which made a huge amount of money and was everywhere when I was a kid, like it was a blockbuster in its own way, was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at $108 million at the time.
In 1970, what? Three?
For a drama.
1975.
5, yeah.
For a drama. That's incredible.
It's amazing in the 70s how the dramas kind of were the blockbusters at a lot of the time. And then Jaws and Star Wars and stuff started to change that to an extent. So Shampoo is another movie. It came in, and this is kind of where the normal blockbusters of the time came in. It was about $50 million. Dog Day Afternoon, about 46. Return of the Pink Panther, 41. 3 Days of the Condor, 41. And then we have Funny Lady, The Other Side of the Mountain, Tommy. They all make in the 30 to 40 kind of range at that point. So they're your top 10 movies.
Different world. Different world.
Different also world. Different theater culture too, I think.
I mean, I was going to say the reason it's the oldest movie we've ever done is because we just said it's sort of like the first summer blockbuster. So why would we have done
Godfather, Gone with the Wind. I mean, I don't know what would be blockbuster.
I mean, we know that. I would think Godfather counts. Godfather counts.
It's on our future.
It's on our future list, but we have that in our title, and this is kind of in our minds what we mean when we say blockbuster.
Yes.
Even though we have deviated, we did like adaptation and stuff. That's not.
The one movie on this list that really popped to me, because these movies were a big deal when I was a kid, but nobody ever really talks about them since. Number 10 was The Apple Dumpling Gang. That was the number 10 movie of 1975.
That's crazy.
I'm not familiar with it at all.
Tim Conway and Don Knotts. They made a series of movies. You probably saw them in Scooby-Doo when they showed up in the Scooby-Doo stuff. But they made a movie that I loved as a kid that nobody ever saw called, now I can't remember, The Private Eyes. And I was like it was like live action Scooby-Doo, but with Tim Conway and Don Knotts. Anyway, so the fact that was number 10, like I figured that would be like the number 60th movie of all time. It was a Walt Disney movie because it's just like a comedy Western kind of thing with two comedians starring in it. So anyway,
they also were back then. They were names.
They were names.
They were
big names.
Absolutely.
They were kind of a team that did, 4-quadrant comedies for Disney, or something like that. So
it's like the Kurt Russell Disney movies. They probably rank somewhere in there if we were in the right year, right?
Yeah, probably.
Like all those really young Kurt Russell movies, Strongest Man in the World, Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, all that stuff.
And like the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, I think is that the
Yeah.
one that kind of launched Tim Conway in some ways in the movie, this kind of family movie category. But then
When I was
everybody
a
knows
kid,
him for Three's Company.
I thought that like the Starkist
Mr.
tuna
Mm-hmm.
came from that movie when I was a kid. You know what I'm talking about? This is like really dating us.
I'm not,
The Ghost of Mr. Chicken. Jesus.
Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
We'll do that on another episode.
Yeah,
we'll break down Ghost and Mr. Chicken. I'd do it. Okay, so our first point after that, I think, is really good because everything, Jimmy, you said in your opening, I think is covered under this. We're claiming mental real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you talked about in your experience watching it like on the water and stuff, a lot of that stuff has to do with this, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. I wanted to, Jamie, you're the one who's talked about this before, so I'll let you take this away and we'll bounce off of each other with this.
Yeah, mental real estate is an article by Terry Rossio on I think it's Terry wrote this one.
Yeah, it's Terry.
It is. Yeah.
On the Word Player website, which I'm a big fan of. And when I was coming up as a screenwriter, it was like the number one place I would always go. And mental real estate is kind of the idea. It's kind of like I'd even call it soft IP in some ways, but it's kind of like taking a world or an arena. When I say world, I more mean arena, like boxing, or not a boxing arena, but, or, you know, if you were going to be the definitive movie about landscaping or something, just because there's a lawnmower riding around my outside, which I don't think anybody's done. So if you want to claim that, go for it. And this is the definitive movie. So the first movie you think of, if I said, what's the first movie you think of about a shark? And it
For
would be
landscaping,
Jaws.
would it be Caddyshack?
No,
That's golf.
maybe.
That's golf. You're right.
That's
Okay, sorry.
First movie you think about golf might be Caddyshack.
That's what I'm saying. That's
No,
a
it
good
would be.
example. Yeah.
Happy Gilmore,
think-
Caddyshack.
I don't think Tin Cup would fare. You know, wasn't as popular.
I think more people today would say Happy Gilmore or Caddyshack.
And
I think
if
those
I
two.
said what's the first movie you think of when you think about dinosaurs? You think Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park.
Carnosaur,
yeah.
obviously.
Dinosaur, obviously, or tornadoes would be Twister, you know, something like that.
Right.
So that's why when I say it's soft IP, you know, if I said the first movie you think about when you think about Batman, that's the real IP. But
Right.
tornadoes is another thing, or dodgeball
Twister,
might be
right.
another
Yeah,
thing, or
yeah,
something. You know,
yeah. Exactly.
they're things you can actually do as a writer. You can
Well,
claim these.
what if I said
pieces.
summer camp? What would you guys say?
Ernest goes to camp.
I was
gonna say
meatballs. I was going to say.
Meatballs.
but-
I was gonna say Friday the 13th.
There you go. So they're all sort
But
of
it's like-
the genres.
The genre's claiming that mental IP,
real estate.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's a really smart, you know, when you're starting and you're at the very beginning of like, okay, what am I going to write? There's value in, like, Jamie, as you put it, arenas, and going like, what arenas am I interested in that I can do something that has never been done before, so that, like, every time someone thinks of this is the first thing they think of because I got there first.
Right.
And it's sort of like this works with products too. Like, people don't say tissues. Often they say Kleenex, because Kleenex was like the brand of tissues for so long that it's that idea that when you think of something, you think specifically of the brand rather than, like, you know, what it is itself. So I just think this movie is the example of staking claim in something that's never been done. So powerful. Yeah.
A good example that's related to us and this show, you could say Lost in the Woods.
Yes.
What do you think of when you think Lost in the Woods? Blair Witch Project.
I was going to say, like, a lot of horror movies are kind of pitched, like the bigger ones are pitched almost that way. It's like this movie does for the ocean or for camping what Jaws did for the ocean.
That's what I have literally put that sentence. This does for blank what Jaws did for the ocean in my one pagers. I've done that multiple times.
Yeah. So if you find one of those things, you know, if you find that unexplored, and it's not
Child's
easy.
Play does for dolls what Jaws did for the ocean.
It could be that. It does for
Right.
the Toys R Us. What? No, I don't know.
Well,
Does
yeah.
Toys R Us exist anymore? Did they
I
get rid
don't
of
know.
that? I don't know. God, everything's going away. We're really getting old. Toys R Us doesn't exist. I had a really cool Jaws game. Do you remember that Jaws game where you pick things from its mouth?
Yep.
And like you got one, and it would snap your fingers. There was like real danger and pain involved in it. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
No, but it's just like if I'll use an example from my own career. And I'm sure you have way more examples, Jamie, but I optioned a script way back. I've shared this a couple times that was then rewritten by the head writer of that 70s show, and he totally took everything away from it and gave his own characters and put Snoop Dogg in it. And it was right at the time of the height of that 70s show, and we wrote a killer marijuana movie, which is like if you smoked marijuana, then you turn into a zombie, and so it was like this movie will do for marijuana what Jaws did for the ocean is what we popped in there, and that helped us option the script to the point that like then they had like the head writer of that 70s show on it and everything. But
you're trying to overtake Class of Nukem High.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of a close cousin to the public domain IP thing. Like that's because this is the movie we want you to remember when you think about, I don't know, Picture of Dorian Gray or something, and you kind of steal that IP and redo
exactly. That's exactly the concept. So anyway,
and I think both things can help give you a nudge in your log line, because if somebody sees that, they're like, oh, nobody's ever done a movie about the
landscaping.
Yeah,
the landscaping arena has not.
Lawnmower Man. Lawnmower Man.
Lawnmower Man. That was the first one I thought of.
I can't believe that took so long to think of.
Well, and it's the weirdest part about Lawnmower Man is it's the movie the first movie you think about when you think about VR. No, it's not. I don't think. It's the strangest part about it.
It's just the first movie I think about every day, honestly. Right? No, but like you could, if this movie didn't have such great mental real estate stuff, like the event that you went to, Jimmy, wouldn't exist.
It wouldn't exist. Right.
Literally everything you described was like how Jaws overtook that entire space.
They were playing.
No other shark movie would have that happen.
Yes.
The best of these basically launch subgenres, right? That's
exactly.
what this one did.
No, they do. Yeah.
Subgenre.
Yeah. Like it's
shark movies.
Like exactly, and Jamie, we've talked about this in other episodes of like the idea of genre busting, and Alien was pitched as Jaws in space. Then that creates its own mental real estate, right? Like a killer monster in space. The first thing you think of is Alien, right? And all that come after are basically just the first thing that you think of is Alien, not whatever came after it. So, and then
that creates Alien movies,
exactly,
or like
he said,
isolated space movies, kind of come from Alien and everything, right?
So, anyway, it's a really good brainstorming exercise when you're coming up with ideas right from the top of what do I want to write a movie about. So,
it's good. So going along with my rant at the beginning, let's talk about Monster in the House. Monster in the House.
All right, Jamie, we're winding you up now. Pulling the string. Now go.
Yeah.
Hit that bingo card, Jamie.
Being our 100th episode, this is only the 1,000th time I've said this.
2 per episode.
2 per episode at least. So, say it with me at home if you've listened to all 100 episodes.
No, I actually think this is number 42 of horror. I think this is the 42nd time you've said
42nd. So the monster in the house is a save the cat genre, and Save the Cat being the book by Blake Snyder. And he came up with 10 genres, and his genres are not like the blockbuster genres. They're actually story patterns. So unlike Blockbuster, which would have comedy, horror, drama, his more talk about what type of story they tell. And for example, Golden Fleece would be a quest movie where people go on a road trip, a kind of group to win a prize. Buddy Love might be either a friendship or romance story. I'm losing my voice from saying this. And then the Monster in the House is very particular to horror, even though you could do a comedy or something with it. The monster in the house story has 3 elements. It has a monster, and it could be a human monster, like a serial killer, Norman Bates or something like that, or Michael Myers, or it could be a real monster. Like in this case, we have a shark that's really a monster. Somebody's once said that before. So killer shark, killer animals, Cujo, cocaine bear, whatever. They could all be monsters.
A T-Rex.
T-Rex.
Raptors.
Raptors. All these things could be monsters. They could also be curses and things like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the monster or the monster house. The second element is the house. The house is whatever, kind of that sandbox that this monster is contained to, but also that the hero is contained to. I think the big part of the house is that somehow the hero is trapped in this location with the monster. And Jaws, we can talk about that a little bit. It's a little looser.
It doesn't have to be a house, though. Let's
not at all.
Yeah.
It could be the world.
It could be the woods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It could be.
In Dr. Sleep, we decided that it was the minds of the characters was the
It
trap.
can be that out there. It doesn't have to be a place.
Right. And in fact, I even came up recently. I'm kind of dabbling, like I'm putting stuff together that may eventually become a book at one point. But common monster in the house types of houses that I came up with: remote location, that could be one, like the place which help is miles away, the place no one dares to go.
House on Haunted Hill, like that.
It could be, exactly. It's like that
Remote,
place that just nobody wants to go save you. Because what I'm really trying when I come up with houses, why can't they call for help, and why can't they just run away? Like they're the two things. So the doors are locked, which is another version of it. You can't get out of the house because the doors are locked. Keep them out. So you're in the house and you're trying to keep them out. They're surrounding the house.
Defending the castle stories.
Defending the castle.
Assault on Precinct 13.
Yes, perfect example.
I'm the prison, which is like your body horrors and your curses, and they're the house. The person is the house in some ways. Werewolf movies, things like that. Stranger in a strange land. So these would be either if you go to a different country or
Silent Hill
village, Silent Hill, or if you even go to some different world, some weird, interdimensional kind of
Stargate
world or something.
Stargate.
Yeah, there's some there. Yeah.
Yep. I'm almost done here. Social prison.
No, I love this.
I love giving the examples, man.
This is new material. 100 episodes in.
There you go.
Eureka! Hallelujah!
Only took 100. That's it.
The social prison, I'm thinking, is you're isolated. That's why you're trapped. Everybody hates you. Everybody shuns you. Something like that. Forces you into kind of this social prison is another one I had. And last but not least, I have evil is everywhere. So you're the only non-evil thing, and everything outside is evil. So and that's kind of
great.
I Am
like
Legend,
a zombie movie, maybe, or
zombie
something.
Movies, Dawn of the Dead, I Am Legend, stuff like that. Night of the Living Dead would kind of be that. You can't. There's nowhere to escape because everything around you is evil. So we'll put a pin in that for 1 second, because then the last thing is the sin, and the sin is the thing that brings about the monster. And the reason I give for why the sin is important, I feel like there's this kind of karmic equation that happens in movies where what the sin allows, if a sin is committed, and we'll talk about the types of sins, whether it's the premarital sex of Friday the 13th movies or something, or if it's killing Freddy Krueger and hiding it from the family kind of brings about the sin of vengeance or something.
Or like bioengineering or something.
Frankenstein, or something,
right.
Has a sin of playing with powers they shouldn't play with. But the sin in this karmic equation, there's something in our movie mind that sort of justice has to be served. For every sin, there's a price to be paid and things like that. So if you have a sin, it kind of makes sense that there's going to be some hell to pay, even innocent life hell to pay. Like Poltergeist, they built the houses, but only cleared the tombstones and left the graves and the bodies. So the innocent people have to pay the price eventually. So there's this karmic equation that has to be fulfilled in horror movies, I think, that we tick off mentally. So anyway, they're my three things. Let's talk a little bit about Jaws. Jaws, we know the monster is the shark, the monster
Yeah, we
shark.
do. Mythbusters.
The house is definitely the beach, the ocean, and
Yeah.
it's not so much that people are trapped in this ocean, which is a little different, but it's sort of like they're not warned. is almost the trap. It's like the trap almost is the fact that the recklessness of like nobody will stop this thing. There's this feeding machine out there and nobody's going to stop it.
The trap is capitalism.
Capitalism, yes. Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
You're getting to that.
Which is related to the sin. I mean, the sin and the trap go hand in hand in this,
right.
this one. So the sin is that they won't, the sin doesn't necessarily in this movie bring about the monster, but once they realize there is a monster, the sin is what perpetuates it into the full-blown feeding frenzy that happens later in the movie. So it basically, it's like we have to keep the beaches open. We can't close down. You don't understand our town. If we close down, we're doomed. And basically, let's go out in the ocean and pretend like nothing's happened when there's literally a killing machine in the waves. So that's the sin of this movie. So they're the three things: monster, house, and sin.
Perfect.
Very cool. Did we want to talk about the Half Man?
Yeah, I wanted to.
I think we have to, right?
We have to, like.
We this is when we've brought up this movie.
Yeah.
For 100 episodes, we've brought up this movie when we talk about this. So,
Jamie, do you want to explain the Half Man and then we can kind of bounce off?
Yeah. So the Half Man is a common character that appears, an archetypical character that appears in most, if not all, Monster in the House stories. I mean, some version of it appears in almost all Monster in the House stories. Hold on, I did a list of these if you want to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the kind of stuff I've been doing in my spare time.
Making lists.
There's a strike, so what else are you going to do, right? Let me see if I can dig this up. Sorry. It's
I was gonna say I started my own list of this too, Jamie.
Oh, okay, cool.
You guys are saying your list of Half Men, of Half Men examples.
You challenged me. I was like, you know what? Let me just bring mine. Let me bring mine out. The monster helper. So that's that's your Renfields, right? That's someone who's assisting the monster. Either like on the surface, we know they're the monster assistant, or they're doing it in secret, like a familiar. Monster historians, that's basically like Hooper, right? Like your monster expert who they might not have had a personal experience with the monster, but they're like completely obsessed with the history of this thing, and they exist to like basically give the praise of the killer speech, even if they don't have personal firsthand experience. They know about other people's personal firsthand experiences.
Like Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park.
Ian Malcolm is a great example.
He doesn't have any experience, but he knows what can go wrong. Right.
Your monster hunters, which that Quint is something different that I'm going to get to next, but it's basically like that self-explanatory. And then there's one I call monster mimic, which is their past experience with the monster has turned them into a monster themselves that mirrors the way that the monster behaves. So then they function as a half man in the horror story, but they themselves are a monster that we need to worry about and maybe contain. And I feel like Quint fits that one nicely. So I don't have anything as comprehensive as Jamie there, but you made me go like, oh, let me dig up my my types of half men then.
Yeah, no, my list isn't much bigger. Like I have things like that don't pertain to Jaws, like but like an occultist, like some wizard or something.
Wizard, that's good.
So the law enforcement officer. Now, in this case, it's the hero, but in other stories, like the sequels to Halloween, it is kind of a half man that dealt with Michael Myers in the past.
Yeah, Loomis is a classic half man. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and I have some other ones like that, but some of them.
Or Dewey from Scream.
Dewey from Scream is a good example.
Yeah.
The tragic survivor, which that's what I call Quint in my case. In some ways, he's the one that's survived the horror before. He's there. You could almost make a prequel with Quint in Indianapolis. Yeah. So to me, Quint is an example of this. And what the half man actually does is it gives a chance, one, to praise the killer, which we'll talk about in a second. The kind of hype man for the monster.
Hype man.
Yeah, like that's what I call it in my thing. I'm calling him the hype man. Hype the killer. So it's kind of the hype man for the killer, but also they sometimes have knowledge of how to hunt, maybe the weaknesses, those kind of things, like how to defeat it. They might have some inkling of knowledge to put your hero on the road of how to defeat it. And that's usually what a half man does. It's usually the combination of those two things, hype man and how to beat it is often what happens.
See, this is good because even though we've done the Monster in the House 41 previous times, we haven't done it like this. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah. So Praise of the Killer, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do structure. Okay, That's cool. My list is a little different because I printed it out before we changed it. So Praise of the Killer speech is this thing that I went to a seminar in New York City like 20 years ago when I was learning the craft. And this one in particular was a thriller seminar about Seven. Robert McKee broke down, we watched Seven and we went scene by scene and broke it down for all the techniques you could learn from it, specifically about the thriller genre. But I've always felt this applied to horror, which is why I bring it up more in horror than thrillers. And it is basically what the hype man says to make the audience take the monster threat more serious. And this also works in like a comedy. So instead of Praise of the Killer, it would just be like Praise of the Villain. Like, like you can talk about the villains in comedies and have people be the hype man or hype woman for the villains in a comedy the same way that you would in a horror movie. And it has the same impact. Like we feel more concerned about the threats because of the gravitas that comes out of these Praise of the Killer speeches. So it's like there's some fantastic famous examples of this. The Dr. Loomis, Michael Myers speech where he talks about he locked him up and he spent his entire career trying to make sure, after he first was trying to save him as a kid in an asylum, he realized how evil he was, and he spent his entire career trying to make sure he doesn't escape. And now Michael Myers is out, and that's why he has to stop him. The Kyle Reese Terminator speech, like, this thing is out there, it can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, it doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it will not stop ever until you're dead. Like, that is the Praise of the Killer speech. And in this, like, Alien, you don't understand. Ash says to Ripley, you don't understand what you're dealing with. It's the perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. It's unclouded by conscious remorse or delusions of morality. What does that sound like?
Right.
So this movie has a bunch of Praise of the Killer speeches, but I'm only going to talk about two. And we can talk about the monologue again later, about the writing of the monologue. But Hooper is giving little Praise of the Killer speeches all over the place. During the autopsy, he's talking about how big the bite is and the
perfect
severity
machine of evolution.
Yes, exactly. He said, and when he's talking to the mayor, he says, Mr. Vaughn, what we're dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine. It's a miracle of evolution. All it does is swim and eat and make little sharks. Like, and then he points to the sign that's got a giant shark fin graffitied chasing a swimmer. And he's like, those proportions are correct. It's like, all of that creates this gravitas because here's an expert, a monster expert, who is then telling us just how scared he is of this monster. So anyway, and then Quint, of course, like everything that comes out of Quint's mouth is like a Praise of the Killer speech. But the two,
unless he's singing.
Yeah, exactly. But the two in particular, like his very first intro is just one long Praise of the Killer speech. You know, he's like, this shark is gonna it'll swallow you whole. I've never fought anything like this, so I'm not gonna do it for $3,000, but I'll do it for 10, and I'll give it. Yeah. Anyway. And then, of course, the Indianapolis speech is like the greatest, most famous Praise of the Killer speech ever written, right? So like everything about that long monologue is making us, we were already afraid of the shark, but we're even more afraid of the shark than we ever were before. And that's like 90 minutes into the movie. So It's just if you're writing a horror movie, this is a technique that you need to put in play. Like you need your monster expert, you need your half man or woman, and you need the hype man or woman to be giving this speech. And you can do it as Jaws teaches you. You can have multiple people do it, and you can have it appear throughout the story to keep giving us that reminder of how scary it is.
The audience needs to know what they're up against.
Yeah. And a side note, like one great example is there are 4 praise of the killer speeches in Silence of the Lambs about Hannibal Lecter before she gets to that prison scene and meets him for the first time. So we've heard 4 different monster experts talk about how insanely scary and threatening Hannibal Lecter is. So when we meet him, we're like, holy shit, who is this guy? I cannot wait to meet this monster.
Not that takes anything away from Hopkins' performance, but it also is like, it makes that much greater, right?
You have all this tension built up. Right. Like, who is this fucking maniac, So anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Jamie, do you have anything left on this?
No, that's good.
Okay, I just had to ask.
We winded me up, and I did my pull string.
That's good. And anyone that listens to this show knows that we talk about Quint's praise of the killer speech way too much.
So we're finally here.
We're finally here
in the actual movie,
and we've talked about it so much. There's almost nothing left to say. Yeah. It's like, hey, here it is. It's there. It's the one. We did skip over, but I'm guessing we're just going to put it here. Did you guys want to talk about Jamie's?
I do. I personally want to hear Jamie talk about this. Can we talk about how we just discovered this seconds before we began, and then Jamie didn't even remember that he wrote it?
It's pretty weird that this is happening. It's really odd.
So take it away, Jamie.
Yeah, well, Jimmy was Googling some stuff before this because, and he found an old blog, like a WordPress blog that I worked on back in 2011, and this might not even be the most recent entry. Like it might even go back further. But anyway, I did a beat sheet on Jaws, and and this WordPress blog at the time. I remember what I was doing. So this is before I started to write books or even teach. This was pre-teaching. And I started to break down some of my favorite movies using some of these methods just to see how I felt about them. Maybe even that were different than what Blake Snyder did, or some of them were actual responses to his. Like I was like, I'm not sure that I buy that. Let me go back and watch these movies. And at the same time, I was also trying to make an index of beat sheets, but I quickly gave up on that because better things showed up. I think Save the Cat has a really good, if you go to the Save the Cat website, you can't beat all the beat sheets, no pun intended, that they have on there. This blog, if you look up Beat Street, like Beat Street, King of the Beats, that whole,
it's awesome. You've got a Die Hard one on there.
I was going to say it's a beat sheet and stuff .blogspot.com if anyone wants to visit it. Beat sheets and stuff.
I know I found it before, like because I've used it for other things. Like I know I had Poltergeist in here that nobody's really done a beat sheet for and things like that. And I just type in Beat Street Jamie Nash, something like that. You'll find it.
Jamie's got to Google his own website.
I do, because I can never remember where this thing is. I mean, it is like 12 years old, so it's a long time ago.
And old internet is hard to like kind of find sometimes.
It does pop right up when I do it, because I have done it in the past. So anyway, to make a long story short, this is a beat sheet I wrote like 12 years ago or something. And we don't have to necessarily go through it beat by beat or anything.
No, but you've got some interesting observations on here that I want to talk about.
Yeah, so. And Jimmy just showed me this like 5 minutes before this.
Yeah, there's no prep on this at all.
and the funny thing,
I was Jamie under there's a the flashlight on his face.
The funny thing was that I remembered this as Blake Snyder saying some of these things. I didn't even remember I did a Jaws beat sheet. I thought he did it in his second book. And I couldn't even, like, I was like, even some of the things I said, I think it was the theme stated I came up with 12 years ago.
You wrote something, remembered it as that good that it would be in Save the Cat.
I was like, I'm pretty sure he did this, but it was me that
And then
did
you
it
ended up
12 years
writing
ago.
for Save the Cat too.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of
What a weird
That's pretty
cycle.
funny, man.
it was a strange thing. So I don't know what the best way to go through this. I mean, a couple things that I remember that I can point out, and we're going to talk about character arc and stuff, and I can reference
Yeah, you can.
this.
Yeah,
as we
you
do
can.
it.
Yeah, you can save
Um,
that. So we can table that stuff. But
The only thing that really pops out, and you can go, you the listener can go check this out if you want. But I warn you, I completely could care less about. I was writing this for myself, so it's filled with typos and stuff. So, I mean, you can read it, but it's not like made for an audience.
it's still awesome, Jamie. Come on.
It's kind of my personal journaling.
I mean, it's a writer's blockbusters episode in text form,
Yeah.
pretty
That's what I
much.
love. I love that
sort of like
both Jamie and I deconstructed this movie on our own
Like,
decades ago
right.
before we did this. This is great.
Yeah, and it's funny because I haven't even read. I'm curious of what I'd even say about the third act, because the third act.
That's
does
what I
some
want to
weird
talk
things.
about. So you break it down that your observation is that the 5-point finale starts when the orca sets off into the ocean. That it's a
Yeah.
50-minute 5-point
Mhm.
finale, and that's what I think is a very interesting observation.
Oh, wait a
I've
minute.
never heard anyone say that, and I love that idea.
Hey, can I read something real quick?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
we got to talk about it.
Sure.
This is Jamie's words from 12 years or however long ago.
Mhm.
This is from the break into Act 3. Brody has fully transformed, gone from a wussy pushover to a guy who was willing to risk his life and conquer his phobia.
Uh-oh, Jamie.
Oh, Jamie.
Ah!
I think he's got psychological issues and he's ready to rock. Yeah.
I know, I'm
The
kidding, I'm
listeners
kidding,
don't
but
know that Bob and I
I don't-
don't like the water phobia
Yeah.
that we're going to get into
I
later.
don't think that's his arc, but I think it
Yeah.
shows that
All right,
he's
we'll
ready
save
to
that.
make a move.
But
we'll
no,
save
this-
that. I just had to read that.
No,
Sorry.
but Jamie, like this observation you made, and then I'll let you speak for yourself. That this
Mhm.
observation you made, I think, is a really healthy one, which is the idea that these hard page count numbers
Yeah.
that people strive for to hit these beats, whether it's Save the Cat or Sid Field or whatever, when they're
Mhm.
using these templates to inspire story, people get super obsessive about those exact page numbers, and then
right.
that ends up being a negative thing, because really it's less about hitting those page numbers and more just about getting those beats in there in a way that feels organic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And if you follow along anything I do, that's a big part of my Save the Cat vision. Is the page count is important for a reason. There's
Mhm.
reasons why they make sense. For me, especially in the first 50 pages, they make a lot of sense. But to me, the more important thing and is that you hit all the beats, and there's a reason to hit all the beats, and you hit all the beats in order. That's a Jamie Nash Save the Cat
Okay.
thing. And that's very much what the TV book says to do for a pilot. It says, don't worry about page count, hit all the beats, don't worry about page count.
I
Hit them all in
gotcha.
order.
Is this
I
like a
gotcha.
guide? It's a guideline, not a rule type of thing.
Yeah, sort
Kinda
of.
a little bit.
Sort of. Though I do think it's good advice to pay attention to the page
To pay
counts.
attention to 'em,
I think
yeah.
especially early on, and knowing what kind of movie you're writing and things like that. Like this movie is, I think the reason this movie is such a big blockbuster is becomes kind of this adventure movie, this
Mhm.
out on the sea movie. It's not really,
and we never see the past again. We never see any of those
Right.
characters again. It's like the island is gone, right?
Yeah, I almost view the third act as like the final episodes of a TV series or something. It just feels like we've gone through this whole journey of being, when they set out and do it. So it's a very unusual and interesting choice that they make. But the way I used to this is where I used to struggle with Blake's. If you read Blake's second book, he really tries to hit the numbers.
Oh
And
yeah, obsessively.
I think to the point where he gets some of the beats wrong. How I would break down a beat sheet is I watch the movie and I say, what's the all is lost here? And Brody's son barely escaping death is the all is lost. I don't care that Quint dies and all that stuff. I get that. But that's when your kid almost dies on the beach. To me, that was the all is lost. That
Hey, there's a
feels like
whiff
an all
of
is
death
lost.
there, right? Yeah.
And
I
then,
feel like that's compounded with the mayor
It
saying his kids were on the beach too. Like I feel like that's that. Yeah.
That's the thing that makes you arc, right? That's the thing
Right,
that changes. He doesn't arc because Quint dies. There's no dark night of the soul. There's no mourning. He's in a battle for his life. So that's third act execution of a new plan, kind of.
That's where the synthesis begins. That's the synthesis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so it's different stuff.
Jamie,
so
I've never heard anyone consider, and maybe it's out there commonly, but I've never heard anyone consider the orca, the entire orca being the third act. And I love that. I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah. Most people who would do a Jaws beat sheet would put the orca somewhere closer to bad guys close in. And,
like more toward the midpoint. Yeah.
And if you do that, the dark night of the soul doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me. So it's kind of the same way I feel about lock-ins, and you've probably heard me talk about lock-ins at the midpoint and stuff like that. Like I think a lock-in happens. Some movies it happens at the midpoint. So so these things kind of can be adjusted. But I find it better to kind of free yourself of the page count thing and just figure out why these things happen in your story and how they're affecting your characters and what the emotional journey is. Whereas if you start playing with page count and you're like, well, Quint's death is obviously all is lost. And it's like, why? What is that? How does that make Brody reflect on his life or something? It doesn't.
Yeah.
He's just in a battle for
choices.
survival.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, that's I forgot that I even did. I remember that's kind of a controversial thing I did here, and I think why I did Jaws.
It's a hot take, Jamie.
I haven't
a 13-year-old hot take.
I haven't read the comments from 13 years ago, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's like, "That's not it." That happens at the 50-minute mark. But the only other thing beside that I did want to mention, because I do mention this in classes I teach, is the catalyst beat. This is one I'd like to talk about, the catalyst, because when I say, a lot of people will say, "Oh, the catalyst." This is why works.
You want to reverse it a little further and just explain the notion of a catalyst,
of
very
a catalyst
elementary. So just in case there's a new person who's never heard us talk about this before.
Absolutely. So first I'll give you the kind of simple definitions. The catalyst is the thing that kicks off the story, right? It's whatever that first thing happens. It's a random event or something. But then I'll give you the deeper version of it. The deeper version of it, it's the first thing that happens to your hero that kicks off the story. And it's usually a random event. A meteor hits. I get bit by a radioactive spider. I get a mission. I get a telegram. I have the cute meet with the person I'm going to fall in love with. All of these things are catalysts. That's a random event that somehow kicks off the story, essentially. And it takes us from the hero's ordinary world of working as a sheriff and sitting around the house and driving around and yelling at the karate kids that are kicking down the fence, and turns it into, oh no, I'm the protector against this monster. So what's the first thing that happens that does that to the hero? Some people would argue the first scene. First scene's obviously the catalyst. It's the first attack. But that in horror movies, generally, we've talked about how horror movies usually start with a couple different, they usually start with a scare beat, and it's usually the first kill. It's usually, or an origin story. There's a few different things that could happen and this one's a first kill. But my take is the first kill isn't the catalyst. It's the moment the hero.
For us.
That's for us.
That's our superior position. Yes.
Superior position. We're ahead of Brody right there.
Right. Yeah. Because let's say that body never shows up on the beach, or Brody, the FBI gets it, not Brody. Then it's not Brody's story. It becomes somebody else's story.
Right.
So it's finding the body. It's him seeing that body on the beach. To me, that's where the catalyst would come in this story, because it changes his ordinary life to something else. And honestly, that's semantics. I'm sure if you thought the first thing was the catalyst, you'd still write the finding the body. So it's not a big deal if you want to think of it one way or the other.
No, but it's a good point. The distinguishing between it happening to somebody else and it happening to your lead.
It has to. The catalyst happens to your character. That's the big thing that happens. Something happens to your character that kicks them from the ordinary world to the new world.
Their world will never be the same.
Their world won't be the same.
I feel like the movie confirms this, Jamie, just in the way that, I guess, in Spielberg, how he shows Shark Attack being typed out.
Yeah.
I feel like
Mhm.
that's the confirmation of what you're saying, right? Like,
Yeah. And
Well,
I
it's
think,
that, and that's that. But it's the aesthetics of the turning to the water.
right.
He's filled with dread. He's like, oh my gosh, like
right,
like
right.
To an extent,
What's out there?
what's out there, and
Yeah.
and what am I going to do about it?
to an extent, it's a semantic argument, because I'm not sure if there is a script where the real catalyst wouldn't happen if you screw that up.
I'm sure people could bring exceptions up to us that we'd be like, yeah, that's true. But
Yeah,
it's a good rule of thumb. I like it, Jamie. I like
Yeah.
that. I like the
But
way you put that.
It's the one when I'm describing it, so we can talk about a catalyst. So when I ask my people I work with, what's the catalyst? So they don't just say, well, the shark attacks in the beginning. Well, that's not the catalyst. What's the catalyst? That's the reason I like to clarify it, because
Excuse me if we talked about this, but do we ever talk in the Jurassic Park episode what the catalyst was?
I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Do you remember if we did?
It was like a year ago or 2.
That's true. It was.
I mean, to me, probably the catalyst is, and I don't really remember. It's probably just asking them to come to
It's
the
Hammond.
park.
I was going to say, is
coming
it Ham?
with
Is it just
champagne.
Hammond?
Yeah.
Yep. Probably.
Probably that.
But I could see people arguing that.
And they don't even know because they are not told what they're going to be a part of, participate. The only the stakes for them is the grant, right?
Mhm.
Like for their dig.
It's
So,
kind of like if
which
you were
is
writing,
life changing.
It is life changing.
if you were writing like a cliche 1950s haunted house movie, and it was like, spend the night in a haunted house, that would be it would be the message. You know what I mean? It would be when you,
they get the ticket and
Don Knotts and Tim Conway would then go. and even though maybe
call to action, right?
even though the monster wouldn't show up for 10 more minutes, that would be the thing. It would be the ticket.
I love the Ghost and Mr. Chicken references. Just
Yeah, that's so good.
Running.
No, because that tracks the same here. Because like I'm probably using the term wrong, but call to action here is when he sees the dead girl, just like Hammond is telling them it's time to get up and go. Right, like I'm giving you all this. It's. It works for me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You feel it.
It really works.
You
feel it. There's a feeling there.
Yeah, I like
And
Jamie.
the movie
Jamie
has
talks
started
a lot about how like if you feel it, then it works. Like it's about.
Well, this is art.
Mm-hmm.
You feel it. Sometimes it does mean it works. Yeah.
But,
is that all we're talking
I
about
think
with
that's
this?
plenty with the
I think
structure.
so.
That's funny with this thing that we didn't prepare for
Yeah,
at
on
all.
the fly, 30 seconds before we're about to start, I'm like, Jamie, do you remember this thing you wrote 12 years ago?
Once again, it's beatsheetsandstuff.blogspot.com if you want to find it. If I remember, I'll put a link to it. I sometimes
It's
forget.
Jamie's OG writers blockbusters, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jamie doing this shit day one.
And it was essentially me doing it for myself. And it's really my favorite movies. So I think there's Raiders. There's one for Raiders. There's one for Ghostbusters. And it was kind of like my take on these notions. Kind of like you say, it's like kind of what we do here. It was, but very, very Save the Cat oriented and very theme oriented. I think at the time I was trying to push myself to write about what I thought theme was and how character arcs worked. So I think a lot of it's about that.
Gotcha.
And you just couldn't use spell check, huh? Okay.
I did not use spell check. Nowadays, I'd probably run it through Chat GPT and let it.
I was just going to say that.
I'd be like, clean this up. I should, if I knew the passwords, if I knew the passwords, I'd go back and do it.
Well, speaking of Jamie, once again, your types of horror.
Yes,
talk about
this
that?
is a new one too.
Yeah, well, not necessarily new, but new words. Yeah, for sure.
New codification.
New codification, and there's a part of it I was a little debating with the other day. So again, I've been just kind of noodling. I've been writing down some thoughts on stuff that we talk about all the time here, and I'm just kind of collecting them. And there's one thing we bring up a lot, which is this Stephen King, the 3 levels of horror, or something like that. I should Google the quote. I always forget his quote. But I know he says there's 3 levels of horror. I can never remember the first one, which I substitute with dread. If he calls it just horror.
He calls it the horror. Yeah.
The horror.
It's the horror.
So his version is the horror, the terror, right? and
Yep,
revulsion.
terror and the
It's
revulsion.
I just googled it. It's the gross out, horror, and terror. That's what.
Well, it was revulsion, and then it got evolved into
Yeah. It
got
gross
changed
out,
to-
but it
okay.
I
was-
think Dance Macabre, he has it as revulsion, and then
Yes.
later he changed it. Dance Macabre is a book he wrote about
It's a
horror,
fantastic book about horror.
which I haven't read in like 30 years. I really got to go back and read it. I read it as a kid. He says 3 levels of horror: horror, terror, revulsion, or gross out. So horror is the anticipation of something to come, I believe is the way he describes it. It's the anticipation. By the way, I changed these. So my version of it, I'm kind of taking what he has, but suiting it to my purposes. I call that dread because I just think it's more
dread.
horror. And I never could wrap my head around which one's horror, which
It
one's terror.
felt too ambiguous. Yeah.
Dread's a better word.
Yeah. I just say dread for horror. So dread, my version is this: dread, scares, and gross out. Because I think they say what they say. So dread is the anticipation of something. It's kind of, we talked about it in our previous thing. A lot of it is like red flags or characters ignoring obvious danger. So sometimes the characters see the red flags and ignore them. Sometimes the characters miss the red flags, but we see them.
Mm-hmm.
And could it even be like the characters ignoring the soundtrack getting scared?
Could be. It's
and superior position is it plays a huge part in this. Often the audience is ahead of the character and feeling that dread, right, Jamie?
Yeah. We're getting all these warnings. Basically, we're getting one warning after another that something's coming, and they're getting more and more tense. It's kind of like a rubber band being pulled. And we're waiting for it to snap, and then it gets pulled some more. And we know it's going to snap, and it gets pulled some more. That's dread. Then what Stephen King calls terror, and what I call scares, is snap. That rubber band snaps in our face. The monster jumps out. The attack happens. The physical thing happens. So we're all tense and bottled up. But when that thing happens, we kind of release our tension. We scream, we laugh, we do whatever. And that is the scares. And the thing about how the scares and dread work is once you break that rubber band, you have to basically reset. It goes back to zero almost. You're kind of like, there's a notion of it. So if you keep just putting scare after scare after scare on top of each other, it could work. You're kind of missing a little bit of, I think, the juice you could get from rewinding that rubber band. And some scripts I read, they don't get the dread part. They don't get the warnings and the red flags. They don't get the pulling of the rubber band. They're just going to quickly snap it at you. They keep snapping it at you over and over and over again. And I think if you're a horror writer and you're not using that dread portion, you're missing out on some good seasoning for your script. You're missing out. There's a whole flavor of horror to sprinkle back in there that you could do. And last but not least is the gross outs. And I think we know what they are. Where I was kind of debating, to me, dread and scares are like whatever the real scares and the gross out. They're almost the same thing, because I think gross out and scares kind of go hand in hand. It's just gross outs have a different psychological layer.
I think they're different. Yeah, like they're their own thing.
They can happen at the same time.
It's like a 1-2 punch.
That's
scare,
the thing.
gross out. Like, scare, gross out. Yeah.
Scare, somebody explodes. It's both scary
and
there's blood everywhere.
Like to me, a gross out can be a scare.
Right.
Because your head could just explode, and it could be like, that's a gross out.
I mean, the guy getting his leg bit off, isn't that's gross?
That's
and
scare,
that's also
and then a gross out, like a 1-2 punch of horror.
And the big thing I always say with gross outs when I try to write those is there's really two things. One, I think, is to push the envelope. You really got to try to push beyond things you've seen. Most people just write things they've seen. Then their head chops off, like I saw in the Friday the 13th movie. And they just, I think you kind of got to get, like, what's your twist on it? How do you do it different? Like, if you're going to do some kind of head chop scene, is there a new spin you can put on it? Is there something new you could do? But the other thing I always suggest to people is the more personal they could be. And what I mean by this is watching somebody get their head chopped off is one thing, but watch somebody's finger get broken and snapped all the way back. We can it's something about me. I can picture that happening to me, where I have a harder time with the head chopped off thing.
Well, also like it's just the actual like anatomy. Chopping a head off,
Yeah,
you're dead. It doesn't matter. But you're watching a human being suffer through something.
yeah. Like
The grossed
Right.
out portion of that, the scare of that is much different.
not even really a gross out per se, but I remember Lovely Molly, like one of the things I wrote in there was she's kissing him and she starts biting his tongue and she will not release his tongue. You know, she just bites the hell out of his tongue and he can't get it. He's like, oh, she just like while they're making out. It's just something I can feel what that feels like when I watch. I'm like, my mouth, you know, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes with gross outs, if you can add that personal layer, that the empathy layer, I think it can help with the gross outs too. But push them, put a spin on them, try to be interesting, try to do something different. And they're
Do we want to talk about some specifics?
Yeah.
on,
So
on Jaws? Yeah.
I broke down 2 scenes. So this is
Cool.
my book report for the episode. And
According to Jamie's types of
I
horror.
recodified them to Jamie's types of horror. So there's a couple things bouncing off what Jamie was just saying. I too, because we haven't hit this yet, this bingo card square. I read amateur scripts 5 days a week as my job. So I read scripts.
Really?
So I read scripts.
when did that start?
Shocking.
Way too long ago. I'm approaching number 400.
Congrats.
Thanks, man. I thought I was gonna hit it right at the same time as we hit our 100, but I'm a few behind.
Just lie.
But no. So I read scripts from people who are just learning the craft. Often I'm working with people who are newbies, so they're 1 script in, 2 scripts in, 3 scripts in. Excuse me, and they're like Jamie said, they are the scare beats are missing those extra layers of horror, and they're very fast to the point that like the horror lasts for 1/8 of a page instead of an entire page, and it's very similar. I'm gonna name drop a friend here. One of our listeners, John Squires, my friend. He's the editor of Bloody Disgusting, so a good person to get an opinion from about horror. One
of the good parts of Twitter still left.
Yes. So John had made an observation that you could take our good news, bad news technique that we talk about a lot, and in horror, you could do bad news, worst news, worst news. And so it's bad news, worst news, even worse news, even worse news, even worse news, and then until you get to the worst news. So it's just nothing but doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the bad news that we're watching. And I think there's another version of this beat sheet that I'm going to do in a second, of this horror beats breakdown, that we could just say bad news, worst news, worst news, and it would feel the same. So, but it's very similar to what we talked about with action stories, which is like a lot of people, when they write an action story, it's like John Wick, and we use John Wick as an example of the thing that was, he does win. It is always good news for him, but Indiana Jones walks in, there's the idol, he grabs it and leaves. It's all good news, right? And instead of good news, bad news, good news, bad news, the same could be said with horror, right? You need dread, scare, gross out, dread, scare, gross out. And you can play with these in a number of ways. It doesn't just have to be dread, scare, gross out. It could be dread. Like we broke down in the Alien episode, if anybody's interested and hasn't heard that episode, we broke down 3 different scenes in that episode using these tools. And like the egg scene is like dread, gross out, dread, scare. Like it bounces between these. It doesn't necessarily just go linearly, dread, scare, gross out. So you can play with them. And then in Ghostbusters, and even in Jaws, I'm going to do a little bit of comedy in one of the scenes. If it's a horror comedy, then once that scare beat happens, you release the tension with the joke. So you add a joke to the end of that. So it's dread, scare, gross out, joke. right? So you can play with these if you just like have a scene and you know, just like the good news, bad news technique, and you know what's going to happen at the beginning of your scene, your horror scene, and you know what's going to happen at the end. A way to make it interesting, just like the good news, bad news, is to just put on a blank sheet. Okay, like I'm going to add a dread beat. I'm going to add a gross out beat. I'm going to add a scare beat, you know, and I think it'll make for a more interesting horror experience. So I'm going to break down 2 scenes real quick, and then to show how this works and how Jaws uses these to great effect. So the first one I'm going to do, and I don't think I'm going to do my Micro Machines voice, but we'll see, is the cold open. So Chrissy's death. This is Jamie's types of horror in the cold open for Jaws. All right, let's go.
Do you want me to read some of these for you? I've got it open.
Did I send you the one where I recodified it?
It says dread, scare, and it
Okay,
says dread and scare.
So you could do the Chrissy one, and then I'll do the beach scene. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to see if you didn't want to speak for like
no
10 minutes.
How about you do the Chrissy's death, and then I'll do the beach scene? Does that work?
That's fine.
Okay,
all right.
do it.
So I'm this is Jamie's types of horror filtered through Jimmy about Jaws, read by Bob. This is quite a lineage there. Okay, so
and their My Types Are is based on Stephen King, so he's in there too.
right. So we're all basically on level with Stephen King. So dread, shark POV in the water. Right, that's how we start. Right. Dread, Chrissy jumps into the ocean, naked and alone. Dread, Chrissy's friend passes out on the beach, ensuring she'll be alone in the water. Dread, Chrissy swims out deeper into the calm waters, but we know the shark is near because of the earlier POV shot. Dread, shark POV, underneath Chrissy swimming, moving up toward her legs. Scare! On the water surface, I'm not going to scream that every time. On the water surface, Chrissy is jolted by something tugging on her legs. Scare, Chrissy is dragged side to side, thrashing and screaming for help, powerless to escape the shark that has her legs under the water. Scare, Chrissy's friend is still passed out on the beach. Help is not on the way. Scare, Chrissy screams that it hurts as the shark continues to drag her left and right on the surface of the water. Dread, Chrissy grabs a floating buoy and gets a moment of relief. Scare, Chrissy's ripped away from the buoy, screaming and thrashing, and pulled under the surface, never to be seen again. Spielberg hides the threat while showing its power.
Bam. So there you see how many different beats. So it's not just one long dread.
I like that. I like the dread moment that comes from the scares and then goes back.
Yes, and they bounce back and forth, right? And there, that type of rhythm happens in every one of the horror scenes in this movie. So thanks, Bob. That made my life a little easier.
Yeah, I figured if I have it open, you don't need to read the whole thing.
Because this one's a little longer. This is a much longer scene, but I'm going to go through it. I don't care. So now, taking those same techniques, I'm going to break down the beach scene. And this one is a little bit more toward the good news, bad news. Like there's tension and relief, and then tension and payoff using these scare techniques. So here we go. So this is the beach scene where Brody is, he's learned about the first shark death. He's talked to the mayor. He wants to close the beaches, but the mayor isn't taking him seriously. This is the first time around. Nothing.
This is the Hitchcockian scene of the movie.
Yes, this is the Vertigo scene. Mm-hmm. Yes. Vertigo on the beach, basically. So, Dread. We meet a bunch of potential victims on the shoreline. A woman in a swim cap who enters the ocean, a kid and his dog playing fetch, and Alex Kittner in the red shorts with his mom with the yellow hat. Chief Brody watches the beach. He doesn't take notice of these specific characters, but we are given superior position of the importance. One of them is going to die. We know it. Which is it? Is the Dread. So, Dread, the swim cap woman floats on the raft in the water. The kid throws a stick in the water, and his dog swims into the ocean after it. Alex Kittner enters the water on his raft. Again, we worry for them, and now Brody's POV aligns with our superior position. Brody is worrying with us now. He now also worries one of them is going to die, and he now asks himself, which is it? Also, this is a side note. This gives us like a really great connection with Brody's like dilemma here, right? Like, how can he possibly protect all these people, right? It's like impossible.
Also, it's not just that. He's looking around and seeing the town enjoying themselves,
They're
and you have to be the one to like shit on their whole position,
which is like an
their whole
impossible
summer.
task of it in and of itself. So it just captures his problems so perfectly. Okay, scare. Brody watches the swim cap woman floating on a raft. A dark shark fin looking object approaches her. Brody rises. Then there's a tension relief. It's just an old man in a black swim cap, and we get a laugh. It's a false alarm. It's a relief of tension. Dread. An islander complains to Brody about a trivial problem, blocking Brody's view of the other potential victims in the water. Brody tries to ignore the local and keep watch of the swimmers over his shoulder, and we feel dread for that the entire time. Scare. Another potential victim, a woman swimmer screams and thrashes her arms. Brody rises. Then we see a man whose shoulder she's sitting on also rise from the water. It's another playful laugh, false alarm. So there's tension relief again. Dread. Brody's wife, Ellen, tries to calm him while his kids run into the water now too. In the background, Alex Kittner in the red shorts floats on the raft. He's alone and furthest from the shore, the most in danger. Dread. Another islander blocks Brody's view of the potential victims in the water and mocks his fear of the water. Scare. All the kids in the water, including Brody's kids, splash each other and scream. It looks and sounds identical to what the shark attacks look like and sound like. Dread. The kid who was playing fetch with the dog in the water can't find his dog. We see the stick floating alone, but there's no sign of the dog, and we know the dog is dead. Dread. Shark POV, we get a 10-second underwater shot of all the kids and all the potential victims we've met, legs, swimming in the water above the shark. The shark closes in right beneath Alex Kittner on the raft. Scare. We see flashes of the shark above the water attacking Alex Kittner, who thrashes. Beachgoers see it too. Gross out. We see flashes of Alex's blood as the attack on the water above the surface of the water intensifies. Scare and gross out. So, Jamie, there's that 1-2 punch. We get a scare and a gross out simultaneously. The shark POV of Alex Kittner being pulled underwater, and then Alex's blood, the gross out. Alex's blood clouds the sea view in red. Scare, close up on Brody witnessing the horror, unable to help, his fears fully realized. His failure to close the beaches is his fault, and this death is his fault. Scare, panic on the beach as Brody tries to control the situation. The people in the water flee, and the people on the beach rush to help. Scare, with everyone out of the water, Alex Kittner's mom in the yellow hat searches the beach and ocean for her son, terrified. Gross out, Alex's torn, bloody raft washes the shore nearby. Bam. So there you see another bunch of different uses of, we get dread, we get scare, we get gross out, then we get more dread, then we get terror. Like it's great. So I think both of those you can study and see how these types of horror are used kind of together to create like a really impactful horror sequence. So.
That did also ring of like the good news, bad news.
It's just like good news, bad
really
news.
did.
It's a horror version of that. Yeah,
that's really good.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny, you hit a couple like I didn't even realize were in there. So I made a list, and I won't go through another list, but I made a list of red flags. I started to make a list, and a couple one I had called "Too Far from Shore," and again these are red flags that either the audience sees or the main character could see.
Yeah.
So it's realizing that I've drifted a little. I can't immediately get help. I'm a little too far away.
Too far from the pack, Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that means in your story, what's too far.
That's
the other one I have that I'm not sure that you mentioned this one specifically, but when I think about Jaws, is all too peaceful. Like it's kind of like a fake peace. You know what I mean? Like if it's
calm before the storm.
When everything's so perfect.
That's
it gives you anxiety.
In Chrissy's death, like when she's the calm waters, it's super peaceful. The sun is setting. It's beautiful. But we saw that shark POV like 30 seconds before. So we know that's not going to happen.
Right.
And, it's not going to be peaceful for long. So, yeah.
Also, you're using the genre itself because people know why they're watching the thing.
Exactly.
And peace can be very scary
It's
in a
our
horror movie.
expectations, right? Stillness
Right.
does not mean good in horror.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Everything is not okay. Like, right.
Yeah, but that's a great breakdown. That was fun to listen to.
Yeah. Jamie, or is this for
this
Jamie?
is my point, but I'm going to ask Jamie about stuff.
Oh, okay. The power of researching your story topic.
Yes. So, okay. So let's say you've got that mental real estate, right? You're like, I'm going to play in an arena, landscaping, and I'm going to
You got to do Lawnmower Man
do
now.
something that no one has done, so that every time someone thinks of landscaping, they think of my movie first, right? Well, the next step then is there's this concept of write what you know, and I disagree with that. I heard someone say this, and I've been stealing it ever since, which is know what you write. Instead of it's not write what you know, it's know what you write, because I have read so many scripts that I am 5 pages into the concept, and I can totally tell you that this writer doesn't know jack shit about the subject matter that they're writing about. None of it rings true. There is zero authenticity. And I think one of the main things that you can take from Jaws is the power of authenticity, and therefore the power of research, because even though Peter Benchley had a history of being on the ocean, his family went like swordfish expeditions. He didn't know anything about sharks, and a real life event inspired him to write this story. But before he wrote this story, he then went to a fishing town and he spent time on shark hunting expeditions. He went all out in researching the shit out of this topic. And it shows, right? Like everything that comes out of everything about Hooper is so Hooper specific to a person who works at the Oceanic Institute and his profession. Like, he feels so authentic, the autopsy, his vocabulary, measuring the bone radius of the jaw radius of the shark when they catch the fisherman, those little details, the telling the story of the shark that ate his boat when he was a kid, and like the type of shark, and it was a thrasher, it was a little one, and blah blah, these little details.
Without Brody, the audience has no reason to think that shark wasn't Jaws,
right? Exactly. But you have
right?
Hooper in there, and everything
then
about everything about the world, everything about every movie is a snow globe, right? But you got to fill that snow globe with authentic details that when we watch it ring true. And I just think a lot of people don't value research in their process. They just want to, I get it, right? You get excited about an idea and you just want to sit down to the blank page and get in the flow and go. But sometimes you end up with so much material that you can't reverse engineer. And so if you decide to go, if you get the notes, well, this rings false, this is inauthentic, and then you go back and do the research after the fact, after so much has been created, everything feels forced and like crowbarred in. There's no way to work in all that authenticity. So in my opinion, the research should come at the front end of the process rather than the back end. And often what I read is either scripts that are missing that research effort, or scripts that I can tell that they did the research after the fact and tried to force it into the script. And because they didn't do it at the front, it doesn't work and it doesn't feel right. So I was going to ask Jamie about his feelings about this and how much time you spend researching, Jamie.
Yeah, it's so in Save the Cat writes for TV, and this TV is a different animal for this reason, because really that book's about writing pilots and pilots that get you staffed, right? So up front, I say one of the most important things you should do when considering what pilot to write is write down the world. So this is kind of the write what you know kind of thing, but write down your worlds, the ones you've lived in. So I have two kinds of worlds. One is the kind you live in, and one's the kind you want to live in. So the want to live in, maybe you don't know anything about sharks, but maybe it's kind of fast, because all of us as writers are inherently curious. I can't tell you how many things I started to me as just a story idea, and then I became kind of a subject matter expert on them, and I really got into it, and I'd love to talk about it. So that's where write what you know is both the things you have done and you can just speak to because you lived it. You worked at a job, you grew up in a certain type of family, all those things. But then there are other things like for myself, like when I list it in the book, like professional wrestling is like a world I love to read about. I don't know why, but I love to research it. I'm constantly diving in. There's all kinds of things, certain types of things I just want to study or something like that. And maybe you'll just find those when you go to the concept. But the reason that's more important in pilots, why I think it does have to be a little personal to you, is because you're writing to get staffed. And when you're trying to get staffed, your pilot is as much this is who I am, as it is this is how I write. So there's a little bit of both. So I think showing like the type of person you are is important almost conceptually sometimes in the pilot. But anyway, so now speak to your point of view. There are many times where I have to write a script, or just I come up with a great concept I knew nothing about, like sharks or something, or I have to pitch on something that I knew nothing really about, but I have to bring myself up to speed. I love to research, and in reading scripts recently, whenever somebody is authentic, and I think authenticity is really what hits me with what you're saying, I can tell when they're authentic. Mm-hmm. I can be like, I'm like, oh my, this script is, because it almost makes me, usually when they're authentic, sometimes they're almost not dumbing it down. Like that's the difference.
It's harder to swallow, like intellectually. Yes.
It's the difference.
There's also dangers though, right? Like too much mumbo jumbo and all that, right?
Yes. And usually it is. Usually my authentic claim could be a kind of, reverse
like this
compliment.
person knows way too much about the subject.
But
so there's a slippery slope then, basically.
It can be a slippery slope, but on one hand, there's the on the nose version that looks like somebody just Wikipedia'd a few facts and cut and pasted them right in. And then the other hand, there's the authentic, I know this stuff so much and everybody else knows this stuff too. And they're throwing around acronyms and it's, and you're kind of like, you feel like, oh, I need a cheat sheet for this whole thing. So there's a little bit of a two-edged sword with it. But I favor the things that are in the authentic. Like if it's a range, I like the things that I really feel like, oh, this person knows this world, as long as I can understand the story and continue forward. My suggestion is, like, when I do research for this stuff, and I used to do it a lot more. Now I tend to choose topics that I know a lot about. I don't know what shifted, but I do tend to choose topics. Like I just want that I'm really interested in. Some of them are historical or something like that. But what I used to always make sure I did, I would get every book I could find on the topic, and I would favor memoirs or things with characters talking about it.
Personal testimony.
Personal testimonies is what I always wanted to go for, because I wanted to steal stuff beyond just the facts. Like I wanted to get a vibe, like what type of person does this? How do they talk? Why did they get into this? So I always was going for those personal accounts. And if I could ever find like a memoir of like, a shark hunter or something, that's what I would always go for over like the Great Book of Sharks or something like that.
And that is exactly what Peter Benchley did with that.
And invariably those people that had those experiences are going to be characters themselves.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
They've had some spikes in their life.
I get so much more out of finding those memoirs or finding stories that, and when I say stories, true stories that happen within that world. Like, if there was a shark attack story that somebody was recounting or something.
Yep.
They were always,
it helps you create somebody you'd want to have a beer with,
Yes. Yes. And hear
Quinn
more.
is somebody you want to hang out with.
So the guy, I'm sure this is a factoid that lots of people know, and I'm just saying something people are like, yeah, no shit, dude. But the guy who inspired Quint, the Montauk shark fisherman, is in Jaws. He's the guy who's like kind of mocking Brody on the dock. I mean, mocking Hooper on the dock when he gets there. And then in the water, when all those shark fishermen are coming from out of town, he has this little mumbling mini monologue about, hunting sharks and stuff in the middle of the water. He was so important to Peter Benchley that Steven Spielberg put him in the movie. So to your point, Jamie, like his personal testimony inspired lots of what you saw in Jaws. But there's just like, so there's like the common note that I feel that I come back to wrap this up is I encourage PU to become as close to an expert within reason as possible on the subject that you're going to write about, within reason, right? Like not like a year of research of your life before you start writing. But I can't tell you how many scripts I've read where all I learn about the subject that's new and interesting about the premise is what I already knew. And nothing new is being brought to the table in the script I'm reading, which tells me that the research wasn't done and leads to that feeling of inauthenticity. Or it's like if it's a movie about like sequencing the DNA and I can tell you everything that I'm gonna read in the script and nothing is being brought to the table, then they didn't do enough research to bring freshness to it. So this is
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
it. No, this is Jaws is a great example of like there's so many things that are interesting and unique that I wouldn't have never come up with or known about just even in the experience of the world of Jaws. So
I was gonna say like this. I think this is on our future lists, but to point out Jamie's like whole thing, like actual human testimony or like getting to know some like that. For some reason in my mind, it kept bringing up the fact that the Big Lebowski was a real man.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like the reason that movie is so authentic is because that guy is real.
I didn't know that. That's great.
The
dude is real.
The dude is a real man, and
He's Jeff Dowd, right? He's one of the great film agents, the guy sales agents. Yeah,
right. But like what I'm saying is it's obviously extremely different movie, but like the Coens know that he was one of their best friends. They know this guy, and this guy is deeply entrenched in all of his weird lifestyles and stuff. And it creates this totally authentic movie that people will love. And that's the reason there's like a human connection to experience there. Or,
it rings true.
Whether you're making it rings true, whether it's about like a burnt out, hippie or about a shark, right?
Yeah.
Like the authenticity rings really true. Speaking of characters, does Chief Brody have an arc?
I don't know who wants to lead this, but like this is just.
Well, I think first start out with the very popular common theory on Chief Brody.
Yeah, like I mean, Jamie, am I wrong here? But I can't tell you how many, even in like screenwriting books, that I hold up. I'm a person who defends the screenwriting book,
it's interesting because so what Jimmy's about to say before I interrupted him,
it's fine. Go for it.
Yeah, is that the phobia of water is often claimed as the arc. Like he starts as a phobic of water,
his fear of
and then
water.
he overcomes the fear of water. But
to be fair, there's a lot of water in the movie.
There is,
and there's measurable moments where he's like, "I'm not getting in. I'm not drunk enough to get in that boat," but he gets in the boat. So if that was it, that he already there's like semantics, right? Like he's not in the water though.
In the first 15 minutes, he rides in the ferry. I mean,
the ferry.
Exactly.
I messaged you guys last night while watching it. Like, wait a minute, the ferry scene. Yeah. I was like, he's literally just standing
with
for like an entire
all around him, and there's
no
the water.
There's no verbal nor filmmaking cues that he has any nerves about this conversation.
About it. Yes,
at all.
It's not paralyzing in the slightest, measurably.
And honestly, the idea of getting over a fear that is kind of I wouldn't say a silly fear, but one that most people wouldn't have, isn't really the emotional depth of stuff. There's no bigger, like it would be one thing if he had to get over some emotional scar to get rid of that or something, which is kind of, I guess, hinted at, but it's hinted at, but it's not thematic to the movie or anything else. I get why. It's funny when you started to say, like, am I crazy? Do people say that to you? I can't say I've talked arc for Jaws a lot, but when we were thinking about doing a logline thing, and I was Googling, I was like, I wonder how people set up the logline for Jaws out there. And almost everybody mentions the phobia.
They put it in the flaw, right? Like the flawed protagonist, a man who is afraid of the water has to fight a man-eating shark.
Yes.
Just so everyone gets why I read that beat sheet line. That's what that was about.
So when you put it in the log line, often that's the clue. Usually that adjective that's paired with, sheriff or
It's
whatever.
the dramatic irony.
It is the thing that sets up the arc or something. But aside from that, I haven't really heard people debate that too much. It reminds me a lot of, I think one of you brought up Indiana Jones and Snakes.
The snakes. That doesn't.
I did.
It's a fear,
I said that
but
last
it's not.
night.
It doesn't
I
keep
said
him from getting the arc.
Well,
Yeah.
I was trying to say, like, Spielberg obviously is a master of showing when somebody's afraid of something. And I said, snakes, anyone?
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think if Spielberg wanted us to know that he was afraid of the water, we would have known better.
Yeah.
Right.
There wouldn't be a debate for that at all, right?
There would be like phobic scenes in it, like
Right.
getting in his head and like,
Bob, you mentioned the Truman
I
Show.
mentioned Truman Show,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. You can in the Truman Show. There's no doubt Jim Carrey like loses his
It's
mind
his
and looking at a
wound.
bridge.
It's the wound.
It's his they
They created this traumatic event about the and the whole movie is him overcoming that falsely fed
fear, phobia, right?
to keep him institutionalized, basically.
That doesn't read here for me,
at all.
least.
I don't think it tracks.
So,
but I get that there's verbal cues though,
right
to it, right?
So parking that, saying that we're all saying it's not that.
It's not water.
So what is the arc? And this is something that, my take has always been that it is tied to the sin in this one. It's not, by the way, the arcs aren't always tied to the sins directly or anything, but it's kind of this, you have this sense that he's new to this job. He wants to, nobody is in love with him yet. He's kind of the new guy. He's not one of the islanders. In fact, in that,
they make a big deal. They make a big deal about him never being an islander. They say it to his wife, but he's sitting right next to her. He'll never be an islander.
Yeah. And I actually wrote that as my theme stated in that beat sheet is you'll never be an islander. And I think it's softly related to that in that he is a guy that is kind of getting pushed around by the power figures in the town, and he knows what's right. He knows what's to do, but he kind of goes along with what they say, as opposed to, he almost even to the point of like wishful thinking when they find that shark, when they do bring up the shark, and he's a guy that is kind of, and this is a very timely theme. Like I told you guys, I think this is a kind of a COVID theme. This is like, it's a guy, the government, the society is forcing this guy to make decisions that are reckless and put people in danger and libel almost. And he knows what the right thing is, but he can't really fight for it because there's people higher than him that are kind of pushing him around. And I think he goes from that guy who kind of knows what's right and wants to fight for what's right he goes from that guy to a guy who is going to demand that the boss, almost blackmail that the boss is going to shut down the beach. And he's actually going to go and hunt this shark at the same time. So he goes from one extreme to the other in a sense, even putting past his, and this is where the phobia I think comes into play. He's even going to do it despite the fact that he has his own personal fears, and he's really not the man for the job to go hunt the shark.
Right, not at all.
I said to you guys in that spirit, Jamie, last night, I was like, there is almost like an inadequacy storyline there too. Like he has this new thing. He doesn't feel like he's worth what he's doing.
Right, and that's an extension of you'll never be an islander, right? That feels like it's adjacent to that. I wanted to.
He doesn't feel like he's the guy.
No, not at all. That's very clear. At all. So I wanted to kind of like call back to some things we've used in the past to kind of get to this answer, because I don't have an answer for this. And Jamie, I like what you're saying, and it circles around, or what I'm going to bring here circles around what you were saying, just differently, sort of saying new extensions of that. So like we've talked about, Jamie, your photo finish, right? But sometimes that there's multiple photo finishes and they're all related to those things that need fixing. I didn't do a Brody things that need fixing, but I bet you if you broke down the first 10 minutes, we could do a very traditional arc plot popcorn movie, things that need fixing for Brody. And then these photo finishes are more about like a photo finish for the water, a photo finish for responsibility, a photo finish for safety, a photo finish, that's different. His old way, he's got many old ways related to these very little different parts around this, which is like, he's obsessed with safety, right? The swing set. His kid gets cut on the swing set. He's like, that's dangerous. I didn't fix that. There's too many people on that boat. Get out of there. That's dangerous. He's obsessed with safety, and that's one thing. And he, for me, I keep circling around. There's something, I feel it really big time when I watch the movie now for these deconstruction purposes. He's passive to a fault, and he's paired with two people who are way more aggressive. They're like different versions of aggression. Like Hooper is aggressive, but he's got a nice balance, whereas Quint is aggressive. Quint is a human version of a shark, right? Like, and then the shark is the extreme. Like a shark is like the aggressor to the power. Like in the face of one thing after another, where Brody should be asserting himself. Brody should be aggressively saying to the mayor, don't do this. Brody should be aggressively saying to the people, to the islanders, you can't go on the beach. Brody should be aggressive as fuck, but he's passive because he's trying to be like nice to everybody, right? And the movie like forces him. He basically, that whole finale is him like learning how to be like Hooper and Quint, which is basically like an aggressive, a fighter. And so there's something there about like him. And that's why I pitched to you guys, like, it reminds me of Demolition Man, which the world of Demolition Man is telling Sylvester Stallone's character at like violence, you cannot be violent, you cannot be aggressive, aggression is the enemy, right? And like the whole, we found like deep thematic meaning that like Sandra Bullock's character basically learns from Sylvester Stallone, that sometimes in the face of violent aggressors, violence is necessary to protect yourself and to protect others. Sometimes you got to be an aggressive asshole, right?
Fire with fire.
Fire with fire. And I feel like this movie feels like that, right? Like he is time and time again, he's running away. He's scared.
He's a guy that doesn't make waves, pun intended.
Make waves. So there's something there too. I feel like his old way, new way, you could definitely say like he's unwilling to assert himself and be aggressive. And by the end, it's like lamb to wolf, right?
It's I was going to say The Rock has Nicolas Cage's arc in The Rock where he goes from, a kind of a meek scientist to an action hero.
Like that, right? Like Brody is like fucking that. Meek, dude. Like, yes.
And then it ends with him on a sinking ship holding a rifle blowing up a shark.
Exploding the shark
it's like,
face to face.
Thematically for his life, he's 1,000 miles away of who he used to be.
His old way, new way, his before and after snapshot in that way is dramatically different. What that says about his arc, and Jamie, to your point, the emotional side of things, I don't know. But to me, this time through, I really felt that. I felt that like he's super passive, and then by the end, he's basically Quint, like this shark just fucking ate. In his opinion, he doesn't know, but this shark almost killed his son.
He's a half man at the end of the movie.
This shark almost ate his son. It just ate Quint in front of his face. He thinks it ate Hooper, and now he's got a fucking vendetta against it, just like Quint. So.
Jamie, I can't remember 2, but isn't Brody sort of the half man in 2? I'm pretty sure there's like.
Yeah,
there's like splashes of that. Because he has the experience, right?
The birth of him as a half man.
Of him as a half man.
They try to have it both ways in some ways, but that's why I think the story's so modern in some ways. When I watch it now, it's kind of like, I mean, this is kind of speaking out against social media in some ways, but it's like to be a hero, you can't just
the 100 episodes go hard.
You can't just whine about it on Twitter. You have to take up and do something about it and kill the shark yourself. Damn it.
Yep. Yeah.
Stop whining about the shark and letting everybody else.
I mean, it's true.
Let the world burn. You can whine about the world burning, but that doesn't make you a hero. What makes you a hero is stopping it from burning. And that's kind of what I feel like the arc of Jaws is.
I think it tracks. I think that's measurable. Yes.
And that's a lot more of a mouthful and nuance than just saying you're afraid of water. So I get why people go with the water thing.
He's just overcome a phobia of water.
Of water, yeah. I mean, like I said to you guys, I don't think he likes water. And that's different than being afraid of water.
It bothers
like he's just not good with water. It's not like he's not an ocean-faring man. But he has to do all this stuff. That's like just another little thing hanging off him during this quest.
So
but it's not the main thing. That's what we're saying, right?
Yes, I think we can all at least agree on that. So anyway, it was like my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, Jamie, you said you haven't really talked Brody's arc much. I don't see much talk about it. We're a show that talks about arcs, so I figured it was good to talk about.
Yeah. And I think the one other thing I'd say about his arc is it has a really good moment of grace. The moment of grace is like this kind of critical learning period where things start to turn, like maybe I'm doing it wrong. And it's when he gets slapped in the face there. It's kind of like that question, like, oh, maybe I'm not the good guy I perceive. Maybe I am
the Miss Kittner moment.
The Miss Kittner moment. It's like maybe I am part of the problem. I think he sees it there. Oh, I'm one of these guys. Now I can't be one of these guys. I want to be the other side.
About it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like your modern social media parallel. That's good.
Yeah, it's good. Might get a few people riled up.
The fucking sharks out there in social media.
Right. Let's talk. I've already kind of mentioned this. The most famous not so secret weapon.
So I think this is a topic we've done.
Damn you, Mythbusters!
So I just wanted to bring it up real quick because how can we not? So there's this concept that was definitely born out of this show after watching movie after movie and just seeing it. And it, in my opinion, is a crucial storytelling ingredient to the arc plot Hollywood movie, which is this thing of a not so secret weapon. So it's not Chekhov's gun. It's the Chekhov's gun. It's the most important setup. It's a specialized, premise specific. That's important because it can't be willy-nilly. It's a specialized, premise specific person, place, thing, or scenario that's set up that the hero is going to use in the end to help them defeat the antagonist. So a couple like really easy to learn from examples: Luke using the Force to blow up the Death Star, crossing the streams in Ghostbusters, Ripley's loader in Aliens, Chris using the cotton in Get Out. It doesn't get more premise specific than that.
The gum, the explosive gum in Mission Impossible 1.
That's great.
Right?
I love that. Singing Christmas carols in Elf. You know, Buddy has to sing Christmas carols to save the day, to save Christmas. A most recent example that's great is the dead and buried alt-verse Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yep.
So the Jaws example is the most famous not-so-secret weapon, which is the compressed air tank. And there's two great examples of the setup of how to bury it that you can learn from when you have your own. And they're awesome.
By the way, I think that's where this one shines, is it buries it more than some of the other ones we talk about. I mean, the Doctor Strange one is pretty good at burying it. No pun intended.
They bury it with a joke. Yes.
Yeah.
Literally.
No, and they buried it in such a way I did forget about it by the time.
But it was memorable on its own, so memorable. Jamie, that you hit exactly what I was going to say, which is if you can bury it, it's so much better. Because in Invisible Man, like it's great, but like she walks past the invisibility suit, and you're like, okay, that's the not so secret weapon. It's the Leonardo DiCaprio meme of him pointing to the screen. And then recently in Megan, M3gan, all three of us pointed to the screen when that big robot showed up, and we're like, there's the not so secret weapon. That's it.
Right.
So they bury it twice really cleverly, which is Brody's flipping through the book, researching sharks on his own, and he sees a picture of the shark with the tank in his mouth. And even more cleverly, they do a nice visually foreshadowing. The next page is a guy who's like on top of an observation pole looking at the ocean. So they do this nice 1-2 visual, like they're foreshadowing exactly what it's going to look like.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. And then the second one is a joke. Just like the Doctor Strange, they bury it with a joke. and conflict when Brody pulls that knot on the Orca and all of the tanks are rolling across the deck. Hooper says, "Damn it, Martin, this is compressed air. You screw around with these tanks and they're going to blow up." And then Quint makes a joke and he says, "Yeah, that's real fine, expensive gear you brought here, Hooper. I don't know what that bastard shark's going to do with though. Might eat it. I've seen one eat a rocking chair." So you instantly are sort of taken off balance and not left to think about this being a setup, right? And so it's really clever. This is like really instructive in that way. So if you're writing an arc plot story, if you're writing a Hollywood cheeseburger movie, you need a not so secret weapon. You're crossing the streams.
Right.
Yep.
I was gonna say that's probably my favorite example of of this. This is where we get to where we usually start.
Yes.
Right? This is like usually
this
the
is
first
fucking saga.
This is the bingo card. The first question I've asked Jamie for the past 5 years. Who wrote this shit? And we saved this for last because this is a very special case, right?
Yes. Jamie, who wrote this shit?
Yeah, well, on the surface, it's Peter Benchley wrote the novel, and then it was adapted by Carl Gottlieb. Carl Gottlieb, a guy who I think came from like improv comedy. I think he's like Second City was his background or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day. And a man who I recently met
That's right.
at a horror convention, and the conversation went something like this: "Hey, I'm in the WGA," and he pointed to his hat. He pointed to his hat, which was a WGA hat. And then I said, "Oh, I see there's lots of editions of Jaws logs. Is there anything new here?" "No, it's the same book. They just put a different cover on it."
Riveting.
That was and then I went, "Oh," and I faded into the bushes like Homer Simpson. There you go.
That's awesome.
So meet your heroes is the lesson there, right? Because
meet your heroes. And then I walked up to Henry Thomas and looked at him and said, "Nah," and I kept walking.
Henry Thomas, a known jerk.
Oh, really?
No,
not at all.
I'm joking.
I think he's supposedly the nicest guy.
Yeah, he's probably
super
nice.
Oh, that's
dude.
good news. That's really good news.
But we wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of conjecture about.
Yeah, there's a ton of
this
writers
stuff.
on this.
So,
Right.
Yeah. So for starters, let's talk a little bit about the book. The book came out in 1972 or 3. I can't remember. And I think it was pretty much a bestseller pretty quickly or early.
Gotcha.
It was very different, the book. I mean, it became a much bigger bestseller when they put the poster on it and they re-released it in paperback after the movie came out. But it was a popular book.
Did they re-release it under the new title? Because it was called Montauk originally.
Really? I had no idea. See, I didn't even know about that.
I didn't know that.
Montauk was also the original name of Stranger Things, right?
That's
was
right.
it? Oh,
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Was it, probably for that reason, though, right? As a reference.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I didn't know that, to be honest.
I'm pretty sure. I'm almost positive. Anyway.
So the book had a couple different subplots, and a lot of people know these already. The biggest one is Hooper sleeps with Brody's wife. Like, that's the weirdest one. There's another part where
I wrote them all down if you miss them.
Okay. And they go into that. Yeah, I'm totally doing mine from memory. And they totally go into that. I've never read the book. In fact, if I ever had to pitch for the movie, I'd probably go in and say, "We're going to do the book. Cooper's going to sleep with Brody's wife." And the mafia,
such a different movie.
Yeah.
And the mafia is somehow involved in the town.
So there's a subplot. The reason that all of this is relevant is because Peter Benchley was the first writer, and he wrote three drafts that stuck very, very close to the book. So all this stuff was intended to be in the movie. So Brody is investigating, why is Mayor Vaughn so like insistent that we keep these beaches open, right? Like, yeah, the town needs to make money, but why? Why is he so? And he uncovers a mob. He uncovers the fact that the mob are funding the town, basically. And then the mob when he confronts them, then the mob is on his back instead of Mayor Vaughn. So it's a mob story, basically. Yeah. So that's like a totally different movie.
The mob story makes more sense to me than him sleeping with his wife. The
Yeah,
mob
'cause-
story at least has some sort of capitalism money thing
Well,
going on.
so I didn't write all this down, and I can't speak to this super well, but basically their character makeups were different. Like
Okay,
Ellen's
okay.
character was a little different. It was sort of this Hooper was basically more what Ellen's character needed based on like the relationship that they created between
Gotcha.
Ellen and Brody in the book. And so Hooper was it was less about Hooper being an asshole and more about Brody and Ellen having a rocky, fractured relationship that then Hooper comes in and he's more in line with what she's looking for in a mate and things like that. So it wasn't like, what the fuck is this? It fit the narrative well of the book, but that's not what the movie is. But it's instructive, right? Like you put that in this movie, what the fuck is that?
It sounds like it was almost like and I'd have to read the book to really know, but almost like a drama about
Yes.
small town politics when a shark comes to town kind of thing. And
there was way more haves versus have-nots. And I think it was something that she was more from the haves in her family history, and Brody was a blue collar, and then Hooper's a have. You know, he's a rich kid, and that, you know, and they meshed more. They were similar, yeah.
And the one that you mentioned to me before this was how the shark is killed. They didn't use the compression things,
right? That was a Spielberg idea, not any of these other screenwriters. Yeah, Spielberg had to convince. Spielberg told the studio that he could convince the audience that this was possible and make it work. So all of those nuances of the air tank were Spielberg.
Right.
Yeah. So there's another.
How did the shark originally die? I've never read the book.
So I did a little bit more research, and they do draw him into shallow waters, but they tire him out to the point that they can just kill him with harpoons like Moby Dick. So Brody and Quint use harpoons and just basically stab it to death in shallow waters because it's tired. And, you know, that's not. And apparently the first 3 drafts of the script, that is how the movie ended. And I think there's even some Carl Gottlieb stuff that they like knew that this is those mythology, right? You don't know what the real story is, but they knew that Peter Benchley would refuse. Maybe he had some sort of approval on script, and so they kept the real ending out of the script, and then he found out what it was really going to be and was like furious and trying to stop it, like when they were exploding the tank and everything. Like, what?
Does he still hate it now? Does he? Or did he hate it?
I think he's gone on record as like really being like he's a shark apologist. Like he feels guilty for ever writing the book,
right.
And what it did to the sharks on the planet.
Hence why the importance of keeping him known as a monster,
right, and not a shark.
Because I think that's what does the damage culturally about sharks, right?
Yeah, but there's some other interesting things, which is so Quint's original death was during that ending with the harpoons, he got tangled in the barrels and the ropes the way that Hooper does. You know that moment where Hooper's legs, and then Hooper escapes? That's how Quint dies. So he gets crushed by the ropes from the barrels. So that's way
less thematic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I like talking about these things, because like people think that
also he wouldn't be a half man then.
Yeah, well, maybe he got ripped in half. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then there's a couple more interesting ones. Spielberg pushed really hard. The tank was after he didn't get what he wanted with this. Spielberg wanted the ending to be, this is fucking crazy to me. Spielberg wanted the ending, and he pitched this to the studio to be Brody kills the shark and then turns around and twist ending. There's a second shark and it kills Brody. And the studio said no. It's bleak as shit.
That's really bleak.
So
That's bleak for Spielberg.
Well, if you listen to his interviews, just like the Close Encounters ending,
he was young man.
Talks about how he wouldn't have done Jaws the way he did if he was a father, and he would have put the kids at risk. That's why in Jurassic Park, the kids live. Like he put them in the same peril against the monsters, but the kids live in Jurassic Park because he is a man who had children and grandchildren, a different perspective.
Right.
But the other one that I want to talk about, because this one I just learned for this show. So the cage death. So even in the original shooting script, Hooper is supposed to die in the cage. So when they shot that footage, this is how Bob, as we talk about the final edit of the movie, is why we talk about the final edit of the movie as the script and not the script.
We're not a novel podcast. Novels are text. Movies are the footage in the end.
Be rewritten even in the editing process.
Movies are footage in the end. So,
exactly. Yes. So you see how that underwater cage footage, you can tell that's real, right? Like a lot of it. And they were shooting in Australia the footage with a real actor in a cage with a real shark.
It's a little person in a littler cage. Yeah.
And the shark got caught in between. They were using a really small boat so that they could create the illusion that it's a giant shark. So it was like a regular sized shark, but a really small boat and a really small guy in a cage. And that went wrong. And the shark got caught. That's that footage of the thrashing. The real shark got caught in between the cage and the boat. And the guy had to escape the cage, the actor, to fucking save his life. And so all the footage that looks real is of an empty cage, not a dead guy. And they were like, shit, why don't we just have Hooper live? And so they went back and they reshot some footage of him underwater, escaping the cage. So that stuff of him being shot, escaping the cage, was shot after they originally shot him to be dead. So it's just,
also, it makes it like anyone that would criticize him living, it'd also be like, yeah, but you can fall out. See, here's the
here's the real
somebody actually falling out of a cage.
It's another one of those things where the power of rewriting, right? Like there's power in taking a look at your script and going is this the best it could be? Because these movies did the same thing. We didn't even talk about how many other writers there were on this movie.
Before we get to that, I was just going to say, it's great that this is our 100th episode, because we're talking about a movie, number one, that we all love, but also that's notoriously should be a disaster.
Right.
The stories of making Jaws are nigh as interesting as the movie itself.
Yes.
And there's no reason this movie should have ever worked the way it did. And it's literally proof positive of why we open the show like we do.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It literally proves everything that we've done for 5 years. It's why we only talk about the finished product.
Finished product, right?
Because this is literally the shining example of everything going wrong and being tumultuous and everything, and it working out for the literal best.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say that it's just a great choice for our 100.
That's well said.
Everything we've been trying to say.
My friend said, I'm going to paraphrase it. He said it much more eloquently, but he basically said it's like the antithesis of an auteur movie,
right?
Which is because there were so many disasters that led to what the movie was during the production, because there were 10, by my count on this list here, 10 different screenwriters that we know of along the way that rewrote, helped shape the script to what it was, if you include Robert Shaw, and if you include supposedly Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale doing a polish on the Indianapolis speech, 10 different writers. That's just the writing, not to mention the different creative choices along the way. So the power of collaboration.
If the shark worked, would we even be sitting here talking about this? Or would it just be as famous as Piranha? Which
I love Piranha.
Piranha's great, but you know what I mean? Piranha's not Jaws, though. It doesn't have that social.
Yeah.
the power in pop culture.
Yeah.
I personally, I think some of the stories about the shark not working are sort of apocryphal. This is just
Yeah,
I have no evidence, but I get the feeling they're kind of like, maybe there were a couple shots they missed, but generally speaking,
it's that classic thing where it's like whatever makes the best story is what you're going with to help sell the movie.
Spielberg kind of crafted
with no evidence.
It
That's
made
my
better filmmaker type of thing.
Yeah, like that's a good point, Jamie.
We can't know, but yes.
I can't know. I just had this weird suspicion. Yeah. It's like a lot of it.
I wanted to go down the history a little bit that we learned from this Jaws dedicated website, and then kind of talk to Jamie about his experience in situations like this for anyone listening. So according to this, shame on me for not referencing the exact website, but there's a Jaws dedicated website about the history of the entire franchise. And they have this whole history of the writing itself that's really comprehensive and great and has videos and additional links. And anyway, Peter Benchley wrote 3 drafts and he refused to do any more. He was like, I'm done with it. Like, give it to somebody else. And Spielberg was not happy with the script. And so he brought in Howard Sackler, which I don't know Howard Sackler's background. Jamie, do you at all? Howard Sackler?
I don't.
That's
the name rings bells, but I can't say I know.
Okay, so Spielberg brought in another writer called Howard Sackler, who wrote a book called The Great White Hope that Spielberg, it wasn't about a shark, but Spielberg found great parallels between this book and his vision for Jaws. So Howard Sackler did a draft, and then the writers of the Sugarland Express, that Spielberg's only feature film, if you don't count Duel, which we should count Duel.
We should totally count Duel,
Yeah, Duel's amazing. But so the writers of the Sugarland Express, then Spielberg brought in to do a polish. So that's now 4 writers on the script. So the writers, Matthew Robbins and Hal Barwood, who wrote the Sugarland Express, then came in and wrote another draft. And then Spielberg was still unhappy with the script, and he thought it wasn't funny, and he wanted it to be funny. And that's why he got Carl Gottlieb. They were friends. Apparently they were like in clubs together, social clubs and stuff. And Carl Gottlieb at the time was a script editor on the Odd Couple sitcom. So comedy was his middle name, at that moment. And so he said, Carl Gottlieb says Spielberg, quote unquote, told him to eviscerate the script. And so this was 3 weeks before they were shooting, supposedly, that Carl Gottlieb was brought in to do a massive rewrite. And then apparently Carl Gottlieb, and that's what the Jaws log, Carl Gottlieb's book that Jamie asked him about at the horror convention, is about all of that and how they were rewriting scenes the night before filming, and they were continuing to rewrite scenes based on what they were seeing in the moment, like with all the trials and tribulations of the filming fiascos that were happening. And then supposedly John, how do you pronounce his name? Milius?
John Milius, yeah.
John Milius.
Conan the Barbarian.
Apparently there's Spielberg credits him with writing a 10-page version of the Indianapolis monologue. And according to this website, then Spielberg brought in pre-Back to the Future Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale to do a polish on the monologue. And then Carl Gottlieb says that Robert Shaw rewrote all of that and made it what it is today.
And note that Robert Shaw was a playwright, so it's not like it's not like weird or something
to think about.
Right.
So if you throw Spielberg into the mix with the air tank explosion and all the creative decisions he was making and consider that writing, which I do, and I'm sure you guys do too, that's 10 screenwriters that contributed that we know of. And at the end of the day, only 2 of them are credited. And Jamie, you've done plenty of rewrites like this, right? They didn't end up being Jaws, I don't think, but
I wish. Yeah. And we've talked about it a little bit before. The one thing that's baffling about this one to me, and it might be because it was 1975. So that's the big thing here. That
do you think maybe the rules wasn't as serious about it?
Maybe the rules were different back then. I don't know the history of the current arbitration rules.
Right.
So the rules might have been different. But the way the rules work today, if you adapt something So if it's a book and you get hired to adapt it, the way you get credit is at least 30. You have to have written in, and this includes elements of plot, characters, dialogue, and scenes. That's what it's based off of. 33%. And it's kind of like an arbitrary thing that literally goes to arbitration. But you would have had to done 33% of the work of that creation for an adaptation. Wow. It's like more for a non-adaptation. So anybody that did 33% of the work could have gotten credit. So of those 10 different people you mentioned, throwing out the ones that just did some dialogue or something like that, merely adapting most of the book's plot, you would assume would be 33%. The sheer level of just writing out the book and condensing it to. So it's kind of surprising to me when I hear all these different writers that somebody beside Gottlieb didn't get credit. But again, maybe the rules were different back then. I don't, or maybe some of these stories are a little exaggerated as well.
Right. They're not 100% accurate. Yeah. But
because I guess there's also a notion that you could throw away previous drafts and have Gottlieb start from scratch. But I think you still compare them somehow. I think they still look at all of them just to be sure. They're like, oh, is this significantly different than the other one?
Right. Yeah.
So it is a bit of a head scratcher. It is a bit of a head scratcher. Yeah. And I mentioned this before. The big thing with that now is, like, let's say this was made now. One of the big things people don't realize is all these 10 different people, the only one, at least by modern rules, that gets residuals is the one who gets credited. So all those other people lose out on any residuals.
And probably did then. Yeah.
We talked about this in Guardians of the Galaxy, sort of.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. So that's the big thing. Even beyond getting credit, is it's money that you want your name on these things as well.
Yeah. So I was going to say too, not about that, but for my entire life, I thought John Milius wrote that speech completely. I had no reason to doubt that was true.
Yeah.
Until I did the research for this podcast, and now I'm like pretty sure it's Robert Shaw. Like
that makes the most sense, right?
It makes the most sense. It's pretty much backed up by Gottlieb and everything. So
when you do a table read and for your script, that alone, you'll often have an actor, or when you're doing read throughs or rehearsals, you'll often have an actor take something and make it their own, and then instantly, and that's where it gets complicated, right? Because they just wrote that whole thing, right? But their name's not on the script, so it's very common.
By the way, just because me, I love to list things, but Carl Gottlieb, just to see some of his previous credits, because I think it's really kind of fascinating of other stuff he did. So mostly he's known for TV shows before then, like the Bob Newhart Show and comedy, Flip Wilson, things like that. The Odd
Ghost
Couple,
and Mr. Chicken,
not the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, not quite. So Jaws is, from what I can tell, one of his first non-comedy things. And then from Jaws, he goes on to do he does The Jerk. He wrote The Jerk. Yeah,
comedy classic.
Jaws 2 and Jaws 3D, which is kind of surprising. That he got
such a weird jerk. Jaws 2, Jaws 3D.
Yeah,
it's kind of surprising he didn't write. You sure that's not for Jaws 3 People 0?
No,
because that's the comedy
he did Dr. Detroit.
Wow,
not familiar.
So that's a Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
Star.
Used to be on Comedy Central like every day.
Okay.
The odds.
It was kind of the thing that proved maybe that Dan Aykroyd wasn't the leading man. Maybe should always be like, I think it was his chance to be the leading man.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so a ton of comedy still, even after Jaws. And really, Jaws is the main dramatic thing he did over that time. And he has a lot of credits, but they're just all kinds of comedic things. A lot of like stand-up kind of things, like the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour and George Burns specials and things like that. Yeah.
What a career. Good for him.
And Jaws is like kind of the weird standout there of
Yes.
everything.
That's the weird one. Jaws 3D was a movie. I saw it with I remember my dad went to see it. My dad was a big fan of 3D because he saw it when he was a kid. And when it came back, like I think he was excited to show me 3D. And the first 3D movie we saw, there was a movie called Coming At Ya, which was like the first one like that came out. It was called Coming At Ya. It was a Western 3D. But he took me to see I don't think he saw any of the other Jaws movies.
Just saw the 3D.
He saw the 3D one.
They I actually saw like I think like 2019. I saw a screening of Jaws 3D at the Senator. But it was not packed. I'll say that. It was not packed, but it was a pretty good crowd. Like,
awesome.
But I saw it recently within 5 years. So yeah, on the big
as
screen.
A 3D movie experience as a kid when they went through that phase of 3D. Jaws 3D was in some ways the best story plus 3D movie.
Okay, they made it work. Yeah,
for some reason, but it was kind of cool. I remember enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, Jaws 3D is my third favorite Jaws movie. I had to pick. And when you watch it not 3D though, it's really weird. It's like such an odd movie.
There are scenes where literally like this, I think it's Jaws like float out and just sit there for a second.
Yeah,
and
it's so odd.
I've never seen it.
So. To watch it on TV, it's like, what is happening here? It's not exactly the best movie either, but
it's got kind of a like
the premise
high concept. Like it's a Sea World and Jaws gets into Sea World kind of. It's not really Sea World, but something like it. And it's in the aquariums and stuff. It's pretty cool.
It's a good premise. I wouldn't say it's the best execution.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm kind of surprised they haven't rebooted Jaws, to be honest, because they did Jaws 4 up to Jaws 4. And it was awful. So
I think they're just. I mean, their Meg 2 is coming out.
Meg did that.
Meg did really good business. Meg is pretty much modern.
Yeah, it's got to be bigger, man.
Megalodon.
Bigger. It's got to be a bigger shark than Bruce.
That's why you do the novel, man. You got a good dramatic. Bring the mafia in.
A novel version of the Meg.
We're doing the novel.
I bet there's a novel version of the Meg, and they released it.
No, there is. I read the Meg
Pitch
novel.
Peacock on a limited series version that follows
the limited series that follows. I'm sure.
I mean, that's Universal, man. That's Universal Pictures.
I'm sure somebody's tried it. Yeah,
they're doing a Jason Voorhees or Mrs. Voorhees version of that soon.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
A limited series following Mrs. Voorhees at the camp for like 12
It'll be
episodes.
the Jaws one. Will be this weird story about how this guy is sleeping with the sheriff's wife, and that's really what it's about. It's like this shark thing's in the background. It's like really he just came here to like have an affair, and
the mafia thing could still be plugged into the Jaws we know, but the wife thing, what Spielberg did with the movie, it's so inauthentic to what the movie is now. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't make sense.
And that's the power of rewriting, right? Yeah.
Right.
So,
but I think that's all our points. That's 100 episodes, guys.
100 episodes. Yeah.
Is there anything anyone wants to say or plug?
I definitely want to say a little bit of sentimental that like we've done this show through some really dark times, and they were a spark of joy and brightness during some of the darkest of times, and I'm really grateful for it. I'm grateful for you guys, and I'll say that.
I'll say Jamie, go ahead.
It's kind of fascinating just how fast that 100. We used to do it in person. Which we probably talked about, but then once the pandemic hit, we've been separated ever since. And I didn't think we'll ever go back to being in person. Not for disease, just for convenience.
Yeah, it is really easy.
And we used to do 2 episodes at a time, which is almost
imagine?
Yeah, it's crazy.
To be fair, I mean, I don't think. I mean, even though I was podcasting for a long time before the show, I still didn't know what I was doing. So saying, dude, let's do 2 podcasts at once, it was like, okay, that's like a crazy idea when you're like a little younger, you know?
Yeah, we did
it's
2
like
of these back to back. It was like an all-day thing.
Yeah, we don't. That's way too much. But I was just gonna say thanks. Seriously, thanks for everyone that supported the show.
Yeah,
and who listens. We've gotten some amazing comments and messages.
Really cool.
That like stuff like I would never have expected talking about movies. Somebody's like, somebody's like, I don't know, you got me through like severe depression, and like you got me through like an illness or something like that. I'm like, whew, I wasn't expecting. I didn't think we were doing anything like that. So
it's always like, oh yeah, people listen.
Yeah, people. Wow, somebody listened to this. So just a super big thank you to everyone who ever shared the show, supported the show, donated to the show, anything. Just thank you so much.
Thank you.
So.
And I will bring up, because we never get any emails, and that's because I never share the email address.
People can just message us on Twitter. I mean, whatever.
We have a really long list of movies, so we don't need suggestions on what movies to watch, because generally what people reach out about is like, I would love for you to break down this movie for me. And we're like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But
it's hard enough for us to record the normal show. So like, I'm sorry.
No, but I welcome things people want to learn about screenwriting that we might not necessarily talk about, like new techniques, new tools that people are like, I want to know more about this. I want to learn how to do this, that we might be able to weave in going forward. Mm-hmm. I welcome that. So if anybody has, what do you say? What were you going to say, Jamie?
Yeah. And on top of that, before you give the email, I thought about doing this for the 100th, but thought about it too late, like this week or something. But if anybody had like follow-up questions, I wouldn't mind doing a Q&A on the back of one of like every now and then, like we could just collect our questions and hit them. I don't know that anybody has questions, but if they do, maybe that would be something to start collecting a Q&A kind of. I mean, we could even do it like a little separate thing if we had to.
We could.
Yeah, that'd be
fun. We could. That would be really easy and fun to do. Like, hey, you didn't talk about this. What about that? Yeah.
Or they're just like, Jamie, what's your favorite place to eat?
And I'd be happy to answer that. I'd be happy to.
What's your favorite type of cheeseburger? But
how'd you get into juggling?
Absolutely.
Are you available for hire for my party? No, but the email address is writersblockbusterspodcast@gmail.com. So if you have any follow-ups to episodes that you're just discovering for the first time, that some of them we might have to go back and listen. I'm listening to this podcast you recorded in February of 2018, and I have some questions.
Yeah, no, I have to say, if I had to say anything to the fans, when you message me and act like I just said something to you, but it was something I said 5 years ago, I have no clue what I said.
I love it so much.
It's great. No, it's fine. I'm not mad about it, but it's like, I don't remember. Like, even when we're recording, you guys said we did Aliens, right? And I was like, did we do Aliens? I literally forgot.
We did Alien single. We didn't do Alien.
Sorry, I mean Alien. I forgot we had done Alien for a moment. I was like, did we do Alien? And I'm the one that's like making the graphics and everything, and I'm still like, did we do that movie? I can't remember.
It's like Jamie forgot that he did a beat sheet of Jaws.
Yeah, I did a whole blog. Man, thought it was Blake Snyder that.
So I guess don't overestimate our middle-aged brains.
Yeah, but again, thank you everyone who listens, who shares the show, who then interacts with us after, and if you got any comments, if you want to learn more that we haven't stuff we haven't talked about before, email us.
Just don't pitch us movies. We're taking care of those.
Yeah, we have.
But if you have
we have a list just between us of 30 movies that we just want to do, let alone the Zeitgeist movies, the new ones that are coming out. So we got plenty.
Right. No, it's not because we don't appreciate your suggestion.
Yeah.
We've got so much on our end to choose from. And that's like, we had to tamp it down to each of us doing 10. We could probably each do 50.
50 each.
If we had to. So
I think mine are even like that. It's like Raising Arizona.
No, Jamie's
or
is like
any other Killing Brother movie.
Jamie's like or
for one, for like number one or like it's like 5 movies. So we're bursting at the seams with choices for movies. It's not that we don't think your choices are good. It's just we want to do what we're passionate about.
Yes,
that makes the show better.
Yes, that's well said. Bob.
Hopefully, we'll hit on stuff that is meaningful to you.
Is meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think that's everything, guys.
Yeah, we did it.
We did it, 100. And we got some interesting ones coming up that we will not spoil.
We won't spoil.
Jaws.
Yeah,
we'll do Jaws 2 for the 200th anniversary.
We're just gonna do Jaws 2, 3, 4.
That's it.
And
that's Sharknado.
Sharknado 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Meg 1, 2.
Ghost Shark.
Shark House. All
Ghost Shark.
Amityville Shark House or something. There's an Amityville one. We're gonna do all of them. Just because, isn't there a Shark Night or something like that?
Yeah,
I think there is.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was in theaters. Yeah,
Judgment Night with shark paint. It's
the Shark Night returns.
The Shark Night returns.
I'd watch that. How is
Joker Shark? That's fair.
No. Okay, here's the movie that I want Jamie to write. And I want to direct it is the Street Sharks movie.
Yes.
You guys remember Street Sharks?
Yes.
I want Jamie to write Street Sharks, and I want to direct it.
It's got to star Vin Diesel because he was in the commercial.
He was in the commercial
selling the Street Sharks. Just pitch it to Vin Diesel. This is where you got your showbiz start. Just full circle, Vin.
I mean, it was,
and he's a famous voice actor for Groot.
It could work. Street Sharks were created in the wake of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so like,
oh my gosh! Now I want
a
Vin Diesel Street Sharks written by Jamie Nash.
Yeah, man,
happen now.
My first school lunchbox was Jabberjaws. Do you remember Jabberjaws?
Yeah, Jabberjaw. Yeah. I mean, curling,
obviously
right?
influenced. Yeah, it is influenced by Jaws. I'm sure that's where Jabberjaws came from.
It's I assume if like Underdog and stuff hit harder, that we would have in like a Magilla Gorilla and Jabberjaw type, like all those characters, Top Cat and stuff,
Laugh Olympics.
Oh yeah.
Laugh Olympics. Wacky Races could have been like
Wacky Races.
Incredible.
I think they tried to do Wacky Races a few times, but it never
never
get out of development. Yeah.
If the Brendan Fraser movies did better, if George of the Jungle and then Dudley Do-Right did better, maybe. They all kind of failed. Okay, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to 100 episodes. This is us when we're not talking about a movie. We're just listing off failed projects.
Jamie's about to bring up the animated movies of 2011 and just list them.
The second season Laugh Olympics team breakdown is Space Ghost for the wacky Wahooies. Or whatever.
He's doing it.
I loved Wacky Races. All right. Okay. It's great. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening and see you next episode.